Good evening. I call the Charlottesville City Council business meeting to order. We'll be read out the closed meeting.
I move that this council certify by a recorded vote that to the best of each council member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from the open meeting requirements of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act and identified in the motion convening the closed session were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed session.
Second.
Second, can we vote, please? Okay. We'll now have a moment of silence, please. Thank you very much. Are there any announcements that we have?
Yes, I have one announcement, which is that the City of Charlottesville is accepting applications for boards and commissions until February 1st. Applications are due February 1st unless otherwise noted. There are openings on the following boards and commissions: Affordable Housing Fund Committee, CAF, Board of Architectural Review, Economic Development Authority, Citizens Transportation Advisory Committee, Community Development Block Grant Task Force, Human Rights Commission, Local Board of Building Code Appeals, Minority Business Commission, Police Civilian Oversight Board, Sister Cities Commission, Towing Advisory Board, Tree Commission, Vendor Appeals Board, and the Youth Council. And the Police Civilian Oversight Board application is due Friday, January 3rd, but all other applications are due again February 1st, 2025. So would encourage anybody interested to look them up online, find the applications, and apply.
And speaking of boards and commission, we went in closed session to make some appointments, which Brian will read off now.
Yes. So to the Charlottesville Albemarle Airport Commission, we've appointed Susan Pace Lochte. To the Housing Advisory Committee, we've appointed Pepe Linden, Sunshine Methon, Mike Parisi, and Nicole Scrow. To the Piedmont Family YMCA Board of Directors, we've appointed Melissa Carter. To the Ravenna Solid Waste Authority Board, we've appointed Mike Gaffney. And to the Ravenna Water and Sewer Authority Board, we've appointed Mike Gaffney.
Do we?
That's a motion. That should be in the form of a
Oh, yeah.
motion.
I move that we approve these folks to be on boards and commissions.
Second?
Okay, can we vote? Motion passes 5-0. So we do have a proclamation. Lloyd?
Yes. So this proclamation, I'll read the proclamation and you'll see what's going on here. It's a proclamation to honor Rosalind Collins, December 16th, 2024. Whereas Rosalind Collins, am I saying it Rosalind? Rosalind. Rosalind, great. Rosalind Collins has served the city of Charlottesville with great dedication and distinction for over 34 years as a vital member of the Charlottesville Commissioner of the Revenue's Office, attaining the professional designation of Master Deputy Commissioner of the Revenue. And whereas Rosalind Collins has always displayed boundless energy and enthusiasm for her job and for ensuring fair and equitable taxation for the citizens of Charlottesville. And whereas Rosalind Collins has been directly responsible for numerous innovations and initiatives in the Commissioner of the Revenue's Office. And whereas Rosalind Collins has participated in and led innumerable interdepartmental city teams, usually in the area technology, resulting in modernization and efficiency improvements citywide. And whereas Rosalind Collins on September 25th, 2024, was honored by the Commissioner of the Revenue's Association of Virginia as its Margaret Ann Anderson Outstanding Deputy Commissioner for 2024. Now, therefore, the Charlottesville City Council congratulates Rosalind Collins for this significant achievement and further extends appreciation for her contributions to the city and for her enthusiasm and dedication to serving the citizens of Charlottesville. Signed and sealed this 16th day of December 2024 by Juan Diego Wade. So let me come on down, and if you would come forward. Thank you for all you've done.
Hey.
You and boss want to say anything?
I do, shockingly. right? The Margaret Ann Anderson Award is the highest award we give to a deputy in our association. It's named for, the namesake was Margaret Ann Anderson, who was Commissioner of Revenue in Waynesboro. She served that city for 50 years, highly regarded in our association. If you read the recommendation letter that I wrote for Raj, your jaw will probably drop, but you're right. I wanted to let you know that back in 2021, Roz retired. And we immediately ran into the Great Resignation, and I started losing staff, hand over fist. And we were trying to fill spots, and it was tough. And I went to Roz, and I asked her if she'd consider coming back as a returning retiree, and thank God she did. I think the world of her. She has done so much for the city. We're lucky to have her.
Brandon, did you want to get a picture with Lloyd and with the?
That's right.
This is my brother.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your service to the city. Many.
Thank you. It's been an honor.
Thank you. We're now at the time on the agenda for community matters. There's 6 pre-registered speakers, leaving 10 slots for additional speakers for community matters. At this point, there's another opportunity at the end. Each speaker will have up to 3 minutes. Before opening the floor, the city manager would like to share a few remarks.
So, thank you, Mayor, and members of the council and the public. It is important for me at this moment to express to you all some things that we've been addressing, discussing, and considering as it relates to the story about a low-barrier shelter being proposed for the Cherry Avenue site of the current thrift store. There was a meeting held last Thursday. I was unable to participate because I had the community budget forum at the same time. I have committed to come to the Fifeville Neighborhood Association meeting in January, and I recognize that a number of people are planning to speak this evening on this subject. I do want to share that there are some things that we need to consider as we discuss this issue. One, we do not need to villainize the homeless individuals who are here in our city, and that has been happening based on some of the comments that have been made and things that have been sent to me and said about individuals who find themselves in that difficult situation. I think it's also important for us to appreciate that no decision has been made, and while it may feel as though a decision has been made, no decision has been made. It is a concept that we are looking at. We are seriously looking at it because it is a viable opportunity to bring a low-barrier shelter, year-round shelter to this community. And if anyone has been paying attention to what my experience has been here in this city for the past year, you would know that October of last year was a very difficult time for me specifically as it related to the plight of the homeless individuals who live here in the city and what happened at the Market Street Park. It was a very volatile situation. It was a dangerous situation. And it was one that we were able to successfully navigate, and we were able to get out of that situation without there being any threat to human life, and there were real opportunities that they might not have gone that way. I have been working on this issue since then. It is not a new issue. There have been some folks who feel as though they're surprised by the idea that there's a discussion about a low-barrier shelter in this community. I've been talking about it for a year, consistently talking about it for a year, been working on it for that long. It is my desire to help as many people as I possibly can who live here in this city to live inside and not outside. That's my motivation. I'm not looking to injure any neighborhood in this city. I care about them all. That's my job. That's what I'm here to do. It is expected of me by these 5 people that I will never lose sight of the idea that I have work to do for everyone who calls Charlottesville home. So I just wanted to be able to express that to you all as why we are having the conversation that we are having. And I don't believe there is a neighborhood that is ready to volunteer to say to me, bring the low barrier shelter here. I knew that all along, so I knew it was going to be a challenge. I knew it was going to be very hard to make this decision as to where it would go. But I also want to say that our friends at the Salvation Army, while anyone may want to criticize what anyone does. They're doing good work. I have not questioned that. I believe that they are doing a great job in trying to help as many individuals who find themselves unhoused. And the conversation started with them as, can we consider this site as an alternative, and would that work for you? That's where this came from. And I said, yeah, let's talk about it. But again, no commitment has been made. I made recommendations to council in October after spending many months trying to figure out what is the best way to go about trying to figure out how we can make a difference as it relates to individuals who find themselves unhoused. In reaching the conclusions that we reached, I had conversation with the Salvation Army about their current project for Ridge Street to expand that site, and made a recommendation to council that they received in October to make a contribution to that project. I still stand by that. I also made a recommendation that we consider investing in a low barrier shelter at the Cherry Avenue site. That still wasn't a commitment. That was just to say that that's what it's going to take, and I needed to test this group to see if they were willing to make that commitment. In being able to get their support for expressing an interest in the solution that I had identified, the goal was then to begin work on figuring out who would operate this facility and how it would operate in this community. We still don't have an operator yet because those conversations are still going. So again, I express that to say to you, no decision has been made. We are not doing this to anyone. We're trying to figure it all out. There is work that is involved in all of this. So I just want to make sure that that was clear. I wasn't able to be there to express it myself. I'll be there in January to express it myself. Many of you have come to know I have no problem expressing myself. And my goal has been to be honest and be upfront about everything that it is that we're working on. And as it relates to this issue, which is challenging, I want you to know that I'm taking it very seriously, how complicated it is. And again, I know that no one wants a shelter in their neighborhood. I do understand that.
Thank you. The first speaker that we have is Lisa Costello.
Yes, we have had 7 homeless deaths in our community this past year.
Actually, I'm Robin Hoffman, and I'm filling in for her time because it just happened that way. But I guess I will talk on the fact that we have homeless people everywhere in Charlottesville, particularly near East High. And every day, you know, we're sad to see them have to deal with the climate problems of, you know, very hot weather or very cold weather, and not have a place to live. So although the Greenway that's been, or is being developed right now at the Rivanna River, is for people to really just to have a space to calm, you know, be calm and that sort of thing from everyday life with nature. At the same time, you know, it is a situation where we are very cognizant of people who are suffering, but that's not why I was here today. So I just want to piggyback on the idea of the transportation and having no canopies in the bus stops on East High. Although there's been improvement for the pedestrian crossings, they're still very iffy, and there's still a lot of speeding. And people are noticing that, like, it's very hard to navigate on East High. So I hope that you guys haven't lost that. And I do want to also thank everybody. The Christmas illumination was amazing this year. They did this video lighting that was really cool. And I was able to talk to a lot of people who were tourists. And so I just want to thank you all for putting it together. And also the Relief program. I got 2 sycamore trees. So I just want to say thank you very much for your improvements to the city. and that after this, I'm actually introducing Louis Open Source Recycling. He is giving computers to people at Crescent Halls and many other people, and he's going to be talking later. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Matthew.
Matthew?
Good evening, councilors, Mr. Sanders. My name is Matthew Gillikin. I'm a Fifeville resident. I'm also the co-chair of Livable Seaville. We're an all-volunteer group that advocates for good housing, transportation, and land use policies in the Charlottesville area. And I'm here tonight to speak on behalf of Livable Seaville to express support for the plans that Mr. Sanders has laid out in terms of addressing homelessness in Charlottesville, bathrooms on the downtown mall, additional caseworkers, and both of the shelter options. The city's affordable housing plan that was approved by council a few years ago calls for a ladder of housing opportunity, and I really like that metaphor for how we need to think about giving housing access to everyone in Charlottesville. And currently, if you look at the part of the ladder that addresses homelessness, it's not functioning remotely like it needs to. We have the Ridge Street shelter, which is at capacity at all times. We have Potcham, which only operates part of the year and also is at capacity pretty much all the time. And then we have the streets. And we also have the jails, and we have UVA Hospital, Martha Jeff Hospital. That's kind of the network right now. So we need the high and low barrier shelters that are being proposed. We need the expansions. Hopefully those don't continue to need to be a growing area of need, because we also need transitional housing and supportive housing. But I want to talk about two things as relates to how at least I have come to think about this issue that I think are really important and maybe are missing from some of the conversations going on right now. One is that the people in our community that are most harmed by homelessness is the people experiencing homelessness. And I think that gets a little bit forgotten sometimes. It's devastating to be homeless. Your likelihood of being assaulted is much higher. Your likelihood of not having access to food and medicine is much higher. At the hospital where I work, I see people all the time that are in the hospital for health issues that exist solely because they're homeless. Those are the people that are harmed the most by homelessness. There are other people that are harmed. There are other problems, but keeping those folks at the center of our efforts are really crucial. The other thing is that homelessness is a housing problem. That's how we address homelessness, through housing. We don't address homelessness by shaming people. We don't address it by policing. We address it through housing. And that's what you all need to be doing. And I think that the one thing I would add to Mr. Sanders' plans is I think we need more plans for more supportive housing, potentially at the Avon site. So I'd like to see you all think about that a little more. But when we don't keep the folks most affected by homelessness at the center of the conversations, they end up getting dehumanized. The dehumanization of those people results in a loss of political will to address the correct solution, which is housing as a solution to homelessness. So thank you for your consideration this evening.
Thank you. The next speaker is former Councilor Dee Smith.
Good evening. Dee Smith. I live in Fry's Spring. And I'm just here to talk about something that I hope you will consider. Because I'm here tonight to speak on segregation through the lens of housing and education. As you may remember, in 2018, shortly after the Unite the Right rally, the New York Times and ProPublica came here to investigate racism within the Charlottesville, specifically education, and published their findings on the front page of the New York Times entitled, "You Are Still Black." Ziana Bryant had sent them to me because I have been so vocal about segregation in the school system. In talking with them, I referenced the North Side and the South Side schools, and they said, well, what do you mean, North Side, South Side? And I explained that basically it's north and south of the railroad tracks. They were stunned. They said, you mean there are literally railroad tracks? And it's true. This is what segregation looks like in Charlottesville, the other side of the tracks. South of the railroad tracks is where you find most, obviously not all, but most of the largest and most concentrated pockets of poverty. This is why the schools are so segregated. And Seaville has exacerbated this pattern with recent decisions to significantly increase low-income housing, concentrating it in First Street and Kindlewood, and now Cherry Avenue is on the books to be next, all on the other side of the tracks. Now, the school board is struggling with this, because rumor has it they would really like to significantly, to better demographically balance their schools in the upcoming redistricting, and are finding it really hard because Charlottesville is so geographically segregated. And you'll say, what choice do we have? But you do. And look no farther for intent than your recent decision to route a giant pipeline that's going to go from UVA to Pantops, both north of the tracks, through the south side along Cherry Avenue and Elliott, right past First Street and Sixth Street public housing, up past Kindlewood. That requires digging under those very railroad tracks, coming and going. Does it sound familiar yet? All to avoid routing the pipeline through wealthy neighborhoods north of the tracks, where there were better options and at great expense, because this is what Charlottesville does and always has. Charlottesville puts things where they don't want to see them on the other side of the tracks, and they are willing to pay for the decision. And you will too, likely, because despite having a huge chunk of the population, the south side has no representation on this council. You prove that with a pipeline, and I just really hope you'll think about it in your future decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Matthew Ray. Okay, the next speaker is Kate Rutman. We now have M. Gunter.
Hello, counselors. My name is M. Gunter, and I live off of Jefferson Park Avenue here in Charlottesville. I'm here today to voice my support for the proposed low-barrier homeless shelters on both on Cherry Avenue. I want to emphasize, however, that shelters are only the starting point for meaningfully addressing homelessness here in the city. I grew up in rural Virginia with a life influenced by poverty and all of its trappings. From 2011 until my arrival at the University of Virginia in 2021, one of the few constants in my life was homelessness and housing insecurity. I was intermittently homeless for, I think, just over 3 years during this period. I can't remember the specifics because the trauma of homelessness has a way of turning one's memory into Swiss cheese. When we weren't living in a car or bouncing between sleazy motels, the lack of affordable housing made eviction a constant threat. Nearly every day I walked home from school terrified that there would be a pink eviction slip taped to the door. It is critical to understand that experiencing homelessness as a child makes it extremely difficult to do well in school, let alone graduate. These days, the high school graduation rate sits at just under 90% nationally. For homeless students, it's less than 70%, which, when coupled with the fact that not graduating from high school is the #1 risk factor for experiencing homelessness as a young adult, it is no surprise that homelessness is such a multi-generational problem. I also wanted to bring something up that I haven't seen mentioned in discussions surrounding homelessness all that often, which is the issue of youth who age out of foster care and teenagers who are kicked out of or forced to flee abusive homes. Just days after I turned 18, with more than 6 months left before graduating high school, I was forced to run away from home to escape a lifetime of physical, psychological, and emotional abuse inflicted on me at the hands of my mother. I spent the remainder of high school crashing on couches of various friends whose parents were sympathetic enough to put up with me until I inevitably overstayed my welcome. I need to impress on you tonight, counselors, that I was lucky. I went to high school with a girl who moved in with a 25-year-old boyfriend during our senior year of high school to escape a similarly tumultuous home life. A week before graduation, her body was found in the Roanoke River. I could have very easily been her. To this day, I still don't fully understand how I managed to graduate from high school, let alone matriculate to UVA less than a year after once again becoming homeless. What can be done to support young adults who are in similar situations to the one I found myself in? I know there's no easy answer or solution here, but I'm more than happy to sit down and have a longer discussion with any of y'all about this. I believe the clerk has my contact information and she's welcome to pass that on should y'all like it. I've consciously made the decision to be a very open book insofar as it concerns the hell I lived through as a child and teenager. I don't do it for pity or to show that I've suffered and have since risen above. I do it because these stories need to be humanized, just as Matthew was speaking a moment ago. I hope that this tiny piece of my own story helps you to understand how destructive homelessness is. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So that was the last of the pre-registered speakers. We have opportunity for 12 more. So who would like to speak? You, sir.
I didn't plan on speaking, but I did want to just make a couple comments about what's been said. I was at the Fifeville Neighborhood Association.
Your name, sir?
Sorry, Benjamin Eppard. I live on 7.5 Street Southwest. Ben Eppard. And I know we all saw the Seaville Tomorrow headline that said, Fifeville said, not in our neighborhood. I was there. There were a few people that voiced that complaint, but for the three of you that were there, I think, the thing that kept getting said over and over again was, like, not beside the playground, which is understandable, especially as we heard from the Salvation Army that, like, the whole goal of the low barrier shelter is to serve people that may be on, I don't want to demonize them. I agree with you. The unhoused have to be helped, but people that may be on sex offender list, et cetera. And so it just seems like common sense that at the very least, both of these are in our neighborhood, by the way, but at the very least, you'd put the families by the park and the folks that are the high-risk group on Ridge Street. And I felt like as we walked out of there, really this was the first time that all of us that lived there had a chance to hear about this. And that was what we all came away with, was like, just switch the locations. And I know we're very far along in the planning, but the question is, like, how much is the sunk cost? Is it tens of thousands, 100,000? It doesn't seem like it would be so much for such a permanent decision. I also want to echo what Dee Dee Smith said, which is that, like, Charlottesville does have a problematic history with race. We know that. And so it does seem like it is somewhat distasteful because this is going to lead to an influx of homeless people into Tonsler Park, which has historically been the home of this vibrant African-American community. And so it does feel it's disrespectful and also unsafe. And so at a minimum, like, it just switch the locations. Sorry. I think that's what everybody at the Neighborhood Association felt coming out of it, is these folks need to be helped, but let's do it in a way that's, like, appropriate for everybody, that's safe. And yeah, so it's not the Charlottesville Tomorrow headline's off. It's not in my neighborhood. It's not by the playground. So that's all.
Thank you, Mr. Eppard. Someone here from in the middle section would like to speak? Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Louis Desabry, and I run an organization called Open Source Recycling. We take used computers, we fix them up, and we get them to people who can't afford one. And last year, we received a grant from the CACF, and we used that to go to Crescent Halls and provide all the residents there with computers in their apartments. So I go in and set it up for them and show them the basics, and I do that once a week, all year. And the reason I'm here today is we would like to do more of that in the future. Some of the staff at Crescent Halls has expressed an interest in doing some of the other properties as well. Yeah, my friend Robin here convinced me to come let you know that. We're under the 501c3 of Virginia Organizing, so we cannot accept city money, but I figured this would be the place to let everybody know what we're doing, and hopefully you know of a way you could help out. That's it.
Thank you for that meaningful work. Would anyone over here like to speak? Yes.
Hello, good evening.
Hello.
Mayor Wade, Council, and City Manager Sam Sanders. My name is Susan Cruz, and I am the Executive Director of the Community Climate Collaborative. On this final City Council meeting of the year, I just wanted to take a moment and acknowledge the incredible work the city team has done this year around climate. A lot has been accomplished this year, and I just wanted to take a moment to make note of it. The city voted to achieve a zero-emission transit fleet by the year 2040. We are implementing LED streetlight conversions. The city voted to upzone and provide more housing in the city and more opportunities there, which is an important climate solution. The city voted to adopt CPACE, which is Commercial Property Assessed Clean Energy. Also, in June, the city adopted a new transit strategic plan, which improves frequency and reliability of our bus system, and also launched a decarbonization study of its gas utility this year. Tonight, you have the opportunity to take one more action, which is voting to create a regional transit authority, which is really important in terms of our ability to get additional funding for transit and transit work. There's much more we have ahead of us in the new year. Want to see the city do more to electrify school buses and really lean into the remaining opportunities that are available to get funding for that. Also, I know the city is working hard to figure out solar and on a lot of city buildings, particularly schools. I think we're going to really have to tackle in the new year energy efficiency incentives to bring energy costs down for people who live in the city. And I'm really looking forward to see the results of the decarbonization study. We haven't heard much for months, and so we're really curious what's going on there. And there's going to be a lot of hard work there. I just want to acknowledge the conversation that's happening tonight, though, around housing and low barrier shelters. And C3 really embraces housing affordability creation and housing for all. Climate risks are no laughing matter for many in our community, and the heat risks and other climate risks are only going to be increasing. So I want to acknowledge that conversation too. But I just want to thank, particularly the city team, who's done a lot of great work this year. But we can't take our eye off the ball. We have to continue to lean into this work. And find all the places we have to make these climate decisions. They happen all the time. And it's not just the city's sustainability office that is a part of these conversations. The city transit team has really been stepping into it, but we need our utility. We need all of our departments really working on this. So thank you so much for all you've done this year.
Thank you, Susan. Anyone in this second feel like to speak? In the center, Karen?
Good evening, Mayor Wade and
Good evening.
councilors. Nice to see all of you today. My name is Karen Waters, and I am the co-chair of the board of Cultivate Charlottesville. I am here to thank you for your support of Cultivate Charlottesville over the years as we begin to move into the Vibrant Communities funding cycle. We just want to make sure to acknowledge the city's investment in the work that we do. And also want to encourage you as you consider the master plan for the parks of our interest in being able to create a community garden at Washington Park. And we hope that you will continue to consider that request. And just a word on what Ms. Smith was talking about earlier. It's a very valid point that I hope you all will bear in mind as you think about uses for the city's properties. In creating a film about the history of Washington Park and about Cultivate's work in the city, I learned that the entire footprint of Washington Park will fit into the land that has been set aside for the botanical gardens. So when we think about this north-south thing and what happens where, having done and published a study of the history of residential segregation in Charlottesville, I can tell you that sometimes these things are unintended consequences, and they do have historical ramifications that last generations. So thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Anyone over here would like to, we have a time at the end. I'll come back over here. Anyone like to speak? Yeah.
I'm Jessica Jackson. Listen to her talk about Cultivate Charlottesville. I'm on the Parks and Rec Advisory Board, and one of my concerns our board is the garden plots that we have and the way that they are currently rented out, that people are allowed to rent a garden plot and keep having it year after year after year. And that means that out of a community of over 40,000 people, there's a few who are monopolizing those few plots. And part of our discussion that, I've been very vocal about is that needs to stop, because it just doesn't make sense to me that a few people can keep having all these garden spots when there are other people who should be allowed to do it, and there should be a term limit that, if you've had 5 years, you shouldn't be able to keep going and going and going. And I know I'm from African American communities, and most of the people I've spoken to, they don't even know about the garden plots. And I guess they wouldn't if the same people get to have them over and over. So as you think about equity and, just how to, distribute the resources in our community a little better than what we do, I hope you really would consider making sure that the way that the garden plots are, just the procedure and the rules, that it changes, because currently it allows a few to monopolize it, and that's just not very fair.
Thank you. I don't know the policy on that. I'll inquire and we'll get back to you. Thank you for bringing it to our attention. Anyone? Eileen?
Hi, counselors and city manager. My name is Aline Carey. I'm the co-executive director of Cultivate Charlottesville, and we've been able to speak to you all before. We're still in the very last year of our food equity initiative with you all. As I said, it's the last year. We'll be applying for funds through Vibrant Community moving forward. I just wanted to address the fact that we are in a funding gap right now, so many people have heard about that. We're still pushing forward in our work, our programming in the city schools, in community gardens, and also talking to folks about food security and the overlap. So tonight, as folks were talking about housing and the different challenges for housing, whether it be affordable or basic housing for people, it kind of feels like, ooh, we can't talk about gardens if we're talking about something as important as housing, or maybe even as important as climate action. And really those things are they all overlap. They're all intersectional. So Cultivate Charlottesville is working with PHA on what it looks like to have edible gardens at Kindlewood. We're working with the folks from C3 on what tree canopy means, and along with affordable housing in the city. So we thank the council for investing in us over the last 6 years with the Food Equity Initiative. Hope to get to continue that work through Vibrant Community and the other fundraising measures that we're taking right now to keep our programming going. And as it relates to the garden at Booker T. Washington Park, we're very anxious but excited to hear the presentation tonight from the consultants who have been working on the master plan for all of the park spaces in Charlottesville. So we're kind of keeping our fingers crossed on that, and hoping to come positively out of the process that they have done, which has brought more community members in, alongside the engagement that we did as well with the communities that have traditionally used and are around Booker T. Washington Park. I think one of the things that the co-chair of our board, Karen, just mentioned about the equity between the parks, when you talk about McIntyre, when you talk about the Botanical Garden of the Piedmont and Booker T. Washington Park, there is a history of segregation there. That infiltrates all of Charlottesville, as was mentioned earlier, and the parks are no different. So that is something to keep in mind as well. And one of the reasons, as we look at that location, the history is of great importance. So I'll just end again saying thank you for your support over the years, and hopefully we'll continue working together.
Thank you, Eileen. Anyone else like to speak right now? Thank you all for your comments. We will go on to the consent agenda. Ms. Thomas?
Consent agenda number 2, minutes from December 2nd regular meeting. 3, resolution to appropriate funding from the Virginia Department of Housing and Community Development, Housing Opportunities for Persons with AIDS/HIV grant in the amount of $389,312, second reading. 4, resolution to appropriate Bama Works special event funding, $38,700, second reading. 5, resolution to appropriate grant funds from the Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation in the amount of $393,456.60 for the Pollux Branch Pedestrian Trail Bridge, one of 2 readings. 6, resolution to appropriate funds from the CIP Contingency Fund for emergency repairs to the Fontaine Fire Station parking lot, $200,000.
Can I get a motion to approve?
I would move approval of the consent agenda.
A second.
Okay, can we vote? Thank you. The next item is the city manager's report.
So there are just a couple things that I want to share as a part of my report before I then turn it over to Rion Anthony, Director of Parks and Rec, for the presentation this evening for Parks Master Plan. I just want to share with the public that the sidewalk that's being constructed on Monticello that leads around the curve down to Quarry Road or Avenue will be open this Friday. So it's a good thing. We're excited about that. I just want to do a shout out to the staff who worked on that. We did that project internally, trying to turn over a new leaf and show that we can do projects ourselves and help people appreciate that that can be done. And hopefully that'll add to more things getting done because we, as well as our contractor partners, can get things done.
Did we mix the concrete ourselves?
No, I didn't ask that many questions. I just wanted to know when it was going to be finished.
Okay, cool.
So we do know that that's going to get done, and we're excited about that. Also, earlier today, I did receive a request from staff who've been working and considering the opportunity to pursue an application for battery electric school buses. We already have 2 in the works. We're now considering going after 2 more. So I am reviewing that. So that is good news to our friends at C3 and others. I'm looking at Susan as I say that, and others who've been advocating for us to move forward on that. I do have a proposal, so I'm now looking at that, and we might be able to go for it. So the goal is to make that determination before the January deadline that we heard about. And I think that's it. I'm going to let Rion, I assume you're making an introduction or no? Will, sorry. Will Bassett. So come on up, Will.
Good evening, Council. My name is Will Bassett with the Parks and Rec Department, and we are here tonight to give an update on the Parks and Recreation Master Plan and where we are in the process. We have our consultant, Pros Consulting, back with us tonight to share some information, some concepts with everybody. And Mike Spence, I'll turn it over. He's got a lot to say.
No, I don't. Thank you, Will. Thank you, Mayor, Council, City Manager Sanders. As Will mentioned, this is an update. We are actually getting close to landing the plane on this master plan early next year. But we wanted to kind of share with you all in advance of the community meeting tomorrow evening some of the more technical work associated with this plan and some of the opportunities that we had the opportunity to talk to you about last year. So we want to talk about framework plans, trail connectivity, cost estimating for capital improvements, and then discuss with you some of the next steps. So as mentioned previously, we really had, we knew that there was going to be a focus in the community around creating better shared use paths, better paved trails. And we knew that that would be a high priority. It's been a high priority of this community for quite some time. So part of the scope associated with the master plan was really to identify, not to redo the bike bed master plan, but really to identify segments that were really focused on paved trails, shared use paths, identify those opportunities to expand that system, and then we're working through the process of prioritizing those opportunities. So I know that this is very, very busy, but I just kind of want to point out that you see most of the black lines on this screen are existing paths. You see some green line paths that are associated with things that are in construction, and then just a few that are in design. This is what your system would look like if it did not go any further over the next 5 years or so. So you start to really see, and you heard some of the conversations about north of the tracks, south of the tracks. You can see that a lot of the paved trail system in Charlottesville right now is north of the tracks. And so in working with staff and working in primarily with Chris Gensick from Parks and Recreation, we've really identified significant opportunities to expand this system. Opportunities to take your system, which is only about 7 or 8 miles, to upwards of 20 miles. We are going to be very assertive with regards to this recommendation as part of the master plan, in particular because it was the highest priority of the community associated with those focus groups, survey work, outreach efforts, and so on and so forth. So this is not an intention to kind of run through each and every one of these segments, but the red lines on this screen give you a pretty good indication of all of what those segments look like and where they're located. And so this is something that we are going to work to kind of try to prioritize over the next couple of weeks. This is what that system would look like if you combine what's existing, what's in construction, what's designed, and where there are opportunities to improve upon this. Obviously, we're not focused on the UVA area. They have plenty of walking network there. This is really focused on the Charlottesville residents. And in terms of prioritization, we certainly are working through the factors, the variables that we need to consider. We want to turn this, not just have this be qualitative, but we need this to be quantitative in nature. So the commitment to the jetty and the EPA equity model, geographic distribution, land acquisition opportunities, or is that a barrier? Purpose of the trail, is it recreation, transportation, is it both? What are these trails connecting? And also, are there any kind of special considerations? So we're actually going to be working with staff tomorrow to finalize this work to help prioritize the improvements of this shared use path system. Moving on to the framework plans, which has been mentioned a couple of times this evening. These are the 5 framework plans that we really worked through, setting Kindlewood aside for now simply because that is an effort that was led prior to the Park and Recreation Master Plan effort. There was a significant amount of really hyper-focused community engagement around Tonsler Park, Washington Park, Court Square, and Market Street Park. We've shared this previously, just kind of putting it back up there to let you know that there is significant just hyper-focused associated with these framework plans. So just kind of running through each one of these parks, I know that this is a lot of detail. A couple of overarching things for all of these is shade. And really not just necessarily what we would call mechanical shade or people-built shade, but really emphasizing the need for trees. Adding picnic shelters, improving ADA accessibility, adding outdoor fitness, and not outdoor fitness in the sense that you see these mechanical kind of outdoor resistance training, more functional fitness, almost like it's on a basketball court. That is an opportunity for people, adults, to really be able to recreate alongside the playground. So other components that we want to respond to is some of the changing demographics in this area, the immigrant population and the Indian population, adding cricket to this park, considering futsal for tennis courts. And looking at opportunities to really utilize, have this park be utilized in ways, not just the way it has been used, but also for future residents. So these are some of the changes. We're not necessarily making what we would consider to be wholesale changes to this park, but what are the things that we can add to it that better meet the experiences that the community is desiring? Washington Park. In essence, Washington Park almost functions right now as 2 different parks. You have the upper end and you have the lower end. Focusing on the upper end, we're really talking about trying to improve connectivity throughout that upper side. So walking paths back from the parking lot to the playground areas, thinking about opportunities to utilize that space between the pool and the open lawn and the facility there as an opportunity for event space, but also improving pedestrian access. Expanding the playground area, not having a basketball court up top and also having a basketball court down below. Preserving the sledding hill, preserving and really improving that stairwell from the upper area to the lower area. So there's not what we would consider to be significant wholesale changes on the upper side. Where I think we see the most amount of change is certainly on the lower end of the park. Adding a restroom. One of the things that people have always talked about is we need ADA accessibility from the lower end to the upper end. Well, why is that? Because the only restroom in the park is on the upper side. And so we're adding restroom, we're adding picnic shelters. We want to refurbish both the diamond field and the rectangular fields, really address some of the drainage issues there. We want to work through and kind of changing that playground that's on the lower level to more of a natural play, have it fit in better with that setting. And then, of course, the community garden. This has been identified as a significant need. It does not displace or replace any of the existing experiences. It fits exceptionally well on this site. We want it to be accessible. We know that there is always potentially going to be a need for people to drive and to that park. So ensuring that it has good parking, good access, ADA accessibility to it is really important to us. So that is kind of Washington Park. Moving on to Court Square. One thing that we recognize with Court Square overarching is that we have to be respectful of any of the archaeological findings at this site. So I really want to emphasize that this is a 30,000 foot level framework plan. We're not looking at this to be construction. As you interface the ongoing archaeological studies associated with this site with the framework plan, this potentially could change in some way, shape, or form. But again, we're not calling this a park. This is a public grounds associated with a government facility, the court building, so to speak. It's meant to be a passive site. It's meant to be a historical site. It's meant to be a site of beauty with great landscaping, shade, and recognize the history, both the good and bad, associated with this site. So we are considering art features. We are considering a plaza. We're considering a fountain with a focal point. None of this is necessarily in stone. There will obviously be a significant amount of conversation both with many entities for this site as you start to really dive into what we would call an improvement plan, including the county as well. One thing that we do want to really take into consideration, and this may seem like it's a small thing, but it is kind of a big thing, to represent this entire site, it should be branded the same way. We should be using the same trash cans, the same benches, and so on and so forth. It's very, very different on the quote-unquote county side versus the city side. And obviously, tree preservation, adding trees whenever possible is certainly a part of this. Moving on to Market Street. This does not significantly change much. We really want to bring in the opportunity for establishing this as a smaller venue for events, considerations of such things as bollards to be able to block off the road in front of, or Second Street in front of the library. But we also have to be respectful of the neighbors, right? The library, the Historical Society. So this has been a park that historically, prior to all of the issues at the end of the last decade, had been a pretty strong event park. And so we want to establish that again. We want to establish it as an extension of the mall. We want to establish it as an extension of experiences that people have at the library and the Historical Society. But we don't want to have this park become over-programmed and take away from the experiences that people have at the library, Historical Society, and others. So really looking at event lawns, really looking at a plaza with some sort of focal point decorative planting, adding picnic shelter or picnic tables in the Tree Grove area. And even as we were talking, one of the impediments to doing events here has always been restrooms, having to bring in porta-johns and line those up. We want to put in a permanent restroom at this site, which we think would really support downtown. We think it would support the users of this park and certainly encourage more productive use at this site. And then the last one is Kindlewood. This is just a park that, again, I think we're just bringing it forward as part of the master plan. This does not exist now. The location of it is not even a location in which it's open or a vacant land. But as it was mentioned earlier, there is a significant focus on having the residents of Kindlewood be able to grow their own food. So you see a significant amount of community garden land as well as a pollinator garden. Open spaces, courts, certainly picnic shelters. This is about 1 acre of property. So it's not what we would consider to be a significantly large site. I think it looks significantly large on the map or on this site plan, but at the end of the day, it's not crazy in terms of size. So this is something that is down the road. It is certainly going to be what could be considered a new park, and it will become a city park. But there will certainly be partnerships with Kindlewood as well as Cultivate Seaville to help manage this site and ensure that it presents itself well over a 12-month period, especially with the significant number of community gardens that are there. So the last thing we wanted to kind of cover is just cost estimating for capital improvements. So you're going to get cost estimates with a master plan. But I want to make sure that you know that as you consider the master plan and you consider adoption of the master plan next March or April, you are not adopting a capital improvement plan for Parks and Recreation at the same time. These are what we have identified as the cost improvements that are necessary over the next 10 years for your Parks and Recreation system. So bucket number 1 really addresses, or tier number 1 really addresses life cycle replacement. There's nothing else that you take away from this entire master plan. If it's just about costs, it's that life cycle replacement in a park system never stops. A playground is supposed to last 15 years, but no 2 playgrounds are ever put in at the exact same time. So if you just think about playgrounds, you're always going to be continually replacing playgrounds. But then think about all of the other assets in your park system. So this is important, and it is something that has to occur because it directly impacts the safety and the quality of the experience that people have with your public spaces. Bucket number 2 is really about expanded experiences in your park system. How can we make the most of your existing parks? The framework plans are a really good example of that. And then the visionary bucket is for bigger picture ideas, such things as the, shall we say, the new paved trails that we talked about. So just kind of run through this. I know that these numbers seem somewhat shocking, but you have a park system that probably from a built environment perspective exceeds $200 million in just assets. Think about the buildings. Think about the pools. Think about the recreation facilities. Think about all the amenities within your park system. I know it seems shocking, but if you had to build that system today, it would easily cost you $200 million, if not more. So the life cycle replacement is about 22%. Really taking care of your improving existing parks within your system is about 20% of that. And then the visionary projects, a lot of this is going to tie back to the trail system, is about 60%. So overall, it's not a light price tag, but it's not one of the greatest ones I've ever seen. It's about $75 million. How does this look like in terms of improvements by project type? So $40 million of that is reinvesting in existing parks, facilities, trails. The framework plans that we showed are about $4.2 million. Some new parks such as the High Street property and a small pocket park in the Meadows area, about $600,000. We are not committing dollars right now to the development of the High Street property. We're just putting dollars in there specifically for a site planning process, because that could become so many different things. The shared use paved trails, about 25 million. The nature parks about 4.2, and then just some administrative planning efforts. That's how that breaks out. And then looking at it from a timeline perspective, just very quickly, we are not looking to impact the upcoming budget year. This is a plan that we look at from fiscal year 27 through fiscal year 36. About 80% of this is in the out years. What this allows us an opportunity to do is really to identify the funding strategies and hone in on those that are very specific to those out-year projects. The 16 million, most of that is reinvestment in your existing system, of which a couple of those are the framework plans. So we just kind of wanted to give you a temperature check of what this is going to look like, because implementing a plan obviously is not free. But managing a park system over time is also not free. And we know how important parks and recreation is to the city of Charlottesville. So our next steps, we have on the project website, which will be the last slide here, a public comment period on the framework plans as well as the connectivity analysis. We're also holding an open house tomorrow evening at Carver at 6 o'clock. I will have a very short presentation, but most of this will be easels and boards and having people an opportunity to get up close and personal with these framework plans, connectivity, ask questions, provide comments, give us an opportunity to tweak these. And then really the last bit of the plan is really about acceptance, discussion, and adoption. So I appreciate your time, your attention, and your passion around this subject matter, and look forward to any questions that you may have.
Can you go back, please, the slide?
One.
Please, yes. Thank you.
Sure.
Everybody put those in your calendars now.
Mm-hmm. So, Michael, did you have any comments or questions at this time?
I mean, I guess I'm curious in the master plan how the kind of schematic maps you've drawn of each park, how that would guide investments, how you're seeing that be flexible, just how it would work. Because looking particularly at the maps of Court Square Park and Market Street Park,
right.
I know there were specific areas called out for public art. They're separate from this process, community efforts about creating public art that are ongoing. What degree of flexibility is there, or how tied would it be to they just looked like there's not a whole lot of flexibility in terms of at least like a public art component.
Well, I think the best way to look at this, and I appreciate the question, and I think it's a great one, and I think it's a point of much needed clarification. As soon as you put something in pretty pictures, people have a tendency to think that's what it's going to be. This is an opportunity in which we took the overarching needs of the community master plan efforts. We had hyper-focused community engagement to create what we would call framework plans. So these are meant to be guides. These are not meant to be in any way, shape, or form a Bible. Locations of public art and or some of the elements within the park are certainly subject to change. The sooner you act on the framework plans, the more you can take advantage of the advocacy that has been built up around them with all of the community engagement. But we would expect that you will go through a much more deeper community engagement process as part of a site-specific master planning effort that ultimately ends up in construction documents or phased construction documents. So the details that I think you're mentioning are certainly subject to change and have certain other potential influences that may impact them one way or the other. Hopefully that answers your question.
I think so. I guess just a long way to go still.
Exactly. These are not in any way, shape, or form done. They are meant to be guides, jumping off points, but not meant to go immediately from these two construction documents.
And the other thing I was curious about is if you got really clear feedback in terms of, I think particularly at Tonsler and Washington Park, part of their importance being civic public spaces where
Correct.
Community events can happen, the community can gather. Did you hear feedback about specific investments that were particularly important in order for facilitating community events and their use as community civic spaces. Was there anything that came through, like,
I
very
would
clearly kind of a top priority in terms of that kind of use?
I would say from a Tonsler Park perspective, we know that that is a park that in many cases gets used informally. It is something in which I don't think Parks and Recreation is actively programming that space. It's not really actively programming the spaces at Washington Park, with the exception of obviously the pool. What this has allowed you to do is to have parks that even back when we had our first public meeting, that are really community park oriented. They provide community experiences. And so the opportunity is to say, how can you take, for example, Tonsler Park and create experiences within it that allow groups to form their own events, allow groups to form their own social connections, use the facility at Tonsler Park as a safe place, as a restroom location, as a way for folks to really engage and come indoors and play. But the purpose of Tonsler is really this really active park. There's not a lot of passivity to it. Basketball courts, tennis courts, facility, diamonds, playgrounds, fitness courts. So it's a really active park. Washington Park's the exact same way. Washington Park, however, I think has a natural component to it that we have to be respectful of. Washington Park, I think, is challenged in the sense from an event perspective because the upper end is really, really packed. The lower end is less, it's more open space, but it also feels very, very disconnected. I can see in the future, if you have opportunities to really improve the drainage that is on that rectangular field, that could be a space that you could add events to. Because if you add that playground, it has the parking and it had the space to do that. The upper area just doesn't have a lot of space to really consider it as an event kind of park.
And it just might not have, but did nothing jump out as kind of a top of the list from community feedback in terms of like an investment in expanding or improving like a pavilion, or a specific investment in the basketball court jumped out as like a particularly important investment to facilitate that kind of activity?
It was really that we want a lot of these experiences to remain the same, and anything that you can do to enhance the existing experiences, add such things as community gardens, add such things as restrooms to improve those experiences, were really kind of the major takeaways. It was not, we want wholesale changes to these parks to facilitate completely different kind of use.
Yeah, that's it for me. Thank you.
Natalie? Thank you.
Thank you for this presentation. This is really nice to look at. I don't mean just in like a graphic design way, but the work that's gone into it and the details that were considered. I don't know if this is how nitty gritty do you want us to get today?
It is your meeting, it is your time, so however you want me to try my very best to address those questions, I can.
Okay, because like in the Tonsler Park graphic, it points out a bike rack, but then in the Washington Park graphic, there is no bike rack listed. Does that mean there's no bike rack, or it's not
that
detailed
we are
at this level yet?
That's interesting, because we had that same conversation with Tommy Safranrick today in the city staff about emphasizing that if we're talking about people getting to parks on bikes and walking, that we have to add biking elements. They have to become a part of a park no differently than trash cans and picnic tables and so on and so forth. So yes, I think that is something that we need to call out. Make sure that that kind of nuance in these plans is consistent, especially between Washington Park and Tonsler. It could simply be, without necessarily pulling them back up and running through all the nuances, but it could be that we've identified a location for new bike racks in one park, and then just was silent on identifying the existing stuff.
Okay, yes, because I know there is a bike rack at
Yeah,
Washington Park, but
exactly.
it wasn't pointed out, so I just wanted to.
So it could just be that.
Okay, great, and.
But I'm glad that you brought that up.
Okay, great.
Thank
And
you.
I have, I'm on the Bike Ped Advocacy Committee with Tommy as well,
Yep.
so I've read his comments and generally support the push for playgrounds that are bike specific and also bike accessibility.
Correct.
And for Market Street Park,
Yes.
you've got a couple of trees marked for removal, which I know some trees are bad, some trees are diseased. You know, I just was wondering if that's like a layout issue, is it?
It's actually trees that can be quickly relocated because they've just been planted. So they're not like these huge shade trees that we're talking about cutting down. The idea is to open that space back up and not have trees become an impediment to having events there. So the idea was to focus the trees, all those darker green circles you can see where we're adding trees. I think those only two that we were talking about removing. But that was just intentional to open up that space from a
Okay,
functionality
great.
perspective.
And then so for just reading the graphics, the darker filled-in trees are new, the
Correct.
existing ones are just the outlines.
Correct.
Okay, that helps. Cool, thank you. And then you might have mentioned this and I didn't catch it. Who put together these drawings?
Kimberly Horn. They used to be Land Planning and Design
Mhm.
Associate here in town, and they were bought out by Kimberly Horn, so it's local.
And so they've got a landscape architect in-house?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. For now, I'm good. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Lloyd?
I have two questions. On Washington Park, I'm trying to figure out what is currently where the community garden would be.
Where it currently is?
Yeah, what is currently on that space?
Oh, it's just open space. There's nothing, it is just really space that does not get used by the rectangular field. So I think we kind of see some sort of pathway back towards the baseball field, but the idea was to really look at maximizing the use of what is really, for the most part, rectangular field space.
And I'm struck by one comment that I saw that surprised me a little bit. I was glad to see it, but it talked about the baseball diamond, and the comment was that it was actually being used. The way I took it, it was sort of surprising how much it was being used. People, maybe the administration wasn't aware of how much it was being used. Do you know how much it's been used?
I think that is actually an effort that we're working through right now, is to identify the hours of what we know are formal utilization of athletic fields. Typically, a diamond field that's not lit, you would not want to have it used more than 600 hours a year in order to just manage and maintain it. So I think that is one of those things that we have an idea in terms of how the city programs it, but I think we also have some of these very loose partnerships in terms of access to those fields that doesn't necessarily allow us the opportunity to track them hour by hour. So that is certainly an operational improvement. It did come up, as you're referring to, in the public engagement process, which is why it's been left on that site.
And sorry to butt in, but is my memory correct that part of the discussions of the community garden, I have a memory that part of it was the baseball field could have been used to have it be a more expansive community garden space?
Correct.
Is that still ongoing, or is that a settled conversation?
I think it's more or less a settled conversation based on what I understand. But again, I would look at this again as a framework plan at a 30,000-foot level, that there are opportunities, because there's really only three, maybe four significant flat spaces on that lower end, that if you wanted to look at it and say, hey, you know what, we want to blow up that entire rectangle, that entire lower area, and redo it, you might redo it in a different way. What we're trying to do is to preserve the existing experiences as expressed by the community, while at the same time introducing that community garden.
I mean, the thought that I had behind it really was, going back to a discussion we've had for many years in City Council and also on Planning Commission, of making sure that our parks and our school properties and so on, that we allow room for impromptu events. That if kids were to get together and somebody decides, let's go play some softball, that there's a softball diamond that they could play at. And one of the concerns that I've had is that if we end up programming everything, that there's no space for that kind of impromptu activity. The other thing, while I'm looking at the same page, I hope that people will not make the same mistake that they did when they thought they were preserving the sledding hill at Greenbrier Elementary School, where they preserved the hill all right, but they put a chain link fence at the bottom of it.
That is not our intention at all.
I want to put it out there so that nobody gets the idea that you're going to put a chain link fence at the bottom of the hill.
They're going to be able to sled right on into the restaurant. It'll stop right at the bottom before they get there.
Thank you. That's all I've got.
I don't really have any comments except to say that it's a great work product, and clearly you all did a lot of good thinking on this, and I'm excited about where this will go.
Very welcome. Thank you.
Natalie, you had one more.
Yeah, I actually have two more. One, I don't know if my memory is failing me. Have we gotten a full presentation of the survey in terms of like number of respondents and demographics and all of that?
We did present that in August. I'm happy
Okay.
to, it'll be a part of the plan, but
Okay,
there
there was the August 12th one. I wasn't sure if that was like the final one or if that was preliminary.
that was the,
That was
yeah,
it?
that's where I spent all the time going through all the graphics and
Okay.
stuff. Yeah, the
Great.
charts and stuff.
Yeah, I'm gonna go watch that again. And then something about the Kindlewood Park map, if you wouldn't mind grouping to that,
where
that'd
is
be
it?
great. So what I really like about what this shows is the kind of the closest Charlottesville maybe is gonna have in the near future to like a Barcelona style super block, where there's apartments all along the edge and then community space in the center.
Correct.
Which is efficient land use and really great access for the people who live in those. And so I just wanted to point that out. It's really cool to see.
Yeah, Rian mentioned earlier today that it almost feels like a 1 acre courtyard that is accessible for everybody, but primarily for those residents.
I thought the presentation was great. I just want to add on, we had a couple of comments on the Washington Park Garden, and after the first meeting we had several months ago, actually some leaders from the Rose Hill neighborhood expressed concern, and so I was able to get those leaders together with leaders from Cultivate Charlottesville to hear the concerns, and it was some valid concerns. I think it was good for all sides to hear what it was, and I was able to get the kind of a compromise, a resolution, if you will, to Rion that still be able to keep it there. But I think that park has a rich history in this community, and I think that those leaders just felt that we could do a lot more, and just also had some functional events. I mean, functional ideas. That they can do. Yeah. When I was out there doing that walk-in meeting with those leaders, there's several people were in the park using it, and we asked them, well, what do you think? And we got some good ideas, and those incorporated in those comments. And I think that's also kind of a good way unofficially to get some input. Just go out there and ask people that are out there using it, and not sometimes people come to meetings, they plan to use it. We get this a lot with transit plans. A lot of people talk about, they're going to use transit, but they don't want to give up their cars. So anyway, I think that we're able to, I appreciate Aileen and Ryan, and your staff coming out, hearing the concerns of the residents and willing to make some changes, not much, but I think that we can move forward with the plans. And we'll get more in those details as we move forward with it. But as the neighborhood changes, I think that we want to incorporate those additions so that future generations can understand the history of that that park, because I'm from Richmond. I'm still learning about this community, and I learned a whole lot, you know, during those several meetings. So anyway, great work. Any other comments?
Can you just repeat for everybody again when the next meeting and where it is and what
The
time?
next public meeting is tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. at Carver Recreation Center. The best part about that meeting is you will not have to listen to me stand up there and talk very long. There's going to be easels, boards, people to be able to ask and answer questions related to each one of the framework plans, as well as the connectivity mapping.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Sam, was that it? As far
Unless
as
you want me to say something about how much all this costs.
You know, I think, Mike, you said you wanted a temperature check, you
That's
know.
what it
and,
is.
and it's, yeah, well, if I understand, $75 million.
Yes, the only thing I wanted to mention is that we did build in cost escalators. So we started with today's costs, and then built in a cost escalator for everything that's in year 1 through 5 at 25%, and everything that's years 6 through 10 at 55%. So you're getting what we would consider to be very reasonable future costs built into this. It's not $75 million in today's dollars. It's $75 million escalated.
Along the way.
Yeah. Spoken like a true consultant, right?
Yeah.
But it would essentially be about $7 million annually of new money in the budget for 10 years.
Yeah.
That's
and
the way to look at it.
Is it all?
As mentioned, the framework plans
any
and the
refundable?
connectivity or the connectivity, the new shared framework or new shared paths, shared use paths are approximately 40% of that. It's about 30 million of that is just the trails and the implementation of the framework plans.
What makes that so expensive? Is it anticipated land acquisition or?
There is anticipated land acquisition. There is certainly quite a few barriers because Charlottesville was not built. It was not built to handle cars, let alone handle a shared use path system that interfaces with cars. So there's bridges to be considered. There is land acquisition to be considered. It's not this straight shot development, easy. We're going to lay down, a trail. If you think about John Warner Parkway and think about that trail system and all of the up and down. Think about Riverview and that small little segment. There are a lot of intricacies that go into building paths. And if you wanted to spend a lot of time learning about each one of those segments, I would say do a workshop with Chris Gunsick. He knows those like the back of his hand.
Mm-hmm.
I will just say that what I like about this, and I want to thank Mike specifically, and I'm assuming Rion may have said, yeah, we're not going to get this approved for FY26, so let's think a little bit out there. It gives us time to really think about this. So after you get the final version of it, then the budget team will get the opportunity to take a look at what does affordability look like as we process and balance all the other priorities that are in front of us. And it also gives the team the same amount of time, that same time, to start figuring out how to break down what does an annual scope of work look like for what can we do in all the different areas, because we'll have to come at this with multiple bites at the apple, I would imagine.
Thank you, folks. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Have a great one.
Could I ask, as part of the city manager's report section, a
Yeah.
question?
Okay.
Sam, I know that earlier in reports, y'all mentioned that you were going to have an update in the early part of the year about some of the interventions Mr. Freese's team is working on for some of the, I guess, high priority items that were brought up a couple months ago when we had the tragedy on Elliott. I wondered if you could just say a few things about where that sort of identifying those interventions lies with you all and when you're thinking you'll come back to us.
Sure. So we've been having that conversation recently. When I asked Mr. Freese to present that back in October, I believe it was, the statement that we made was that we would have an identified list of what we were referring to as urgent infrastructure projects by the end of the year, so that's the end of this month. The team is working on that. We have, I'm looking at Brennan, who's smiling at me. We have a list in the works. The goal is to have that list finalized, and the intent is that we would bring a report to you at the first meeting in January.
Good.
Yes. He's hearing that officially. That he's got to make sure
I
that's
see
ready
the dynamics.
for the first meeting.
That's what urgent
First meeting in
means.
January. And ideally, the point that I want to make in that regard is that was a commitment that was made to get the list prepared. And I also have to identify the funds to make it possible. I've been working on that, but I need the list to make sure that we have the right amount of money to do those things.
Yeah, and I don't want to like prejudge anything that we're going to see or whatever. I'm just, some of these, like, for example, I think the point has been made where Rose Hill ties into Preston. There's a traffic signal issue there that may be simple to fix. I don't know. It may be like, oh, let's just go look at this, spend a couple of hours and fix it. Some things may be like, you do one of these, what do they call them, quick build sort of interventions. I don't know. I'm sure y'all have some good ideas, but I do think we just don't need to lose sight of the fact that we got some significant feedback back, a couple of months ago. We need to be accountable to get that done.
Yeah. No, and I would agree with that. And I was just going to say, I don't know if others agree, but I know the first meeting of January is January 6th, and a lot of people in the community are still getting back from the holidays to pay attention. I think we might be okay if it's the second meeting in January. I just know a lot of people aren't as engaged.
You just made our city engineer very excited if that's the case. So,
So can I just offer one
ahead.
other
Yeah.
thing on that point? So we began with a list of places where people were looking for safety interventions that had been emailed to council over time, and that was a starting point in the conversation. But we did make the decision at one point to crowdsource a little bit more, reaching out through the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee to help us identify other places that we haven't been emailed about. And my understanding is that we gave them until the end of this month to provide us with that list. So the second meeting in January might in fact be better for us given that.
BPAC does meet on the first Thursday.
So they just publicly push back on me. You see that? That works. Second meeting in January, we will make a presentation.
I think that's fine, yeah, as long as
That
we're,
works. Okay.
we're obviously moving ahead.
If we must.
Yeah, that's true. So I'll talk to them later about that.
Great. Thank you. Let's see. We now have we're now without action items. The first item is a public hearing and resolution for supplemental appropriation of $7.5 million for in state and federal and local funding for the Charlottesville area transit. This is the first of two readings.
Thank you, Mayor. This is Garland Williams, Director of Charlottesville Area Transit. Tonight I'll get an opportunity to present to you a good story. We're getting $7.5 million combined between federal, state, and local to support transit expansion and also some capital projects and equipment purchases that we need at CAT. 5.1 million of it is coming from our state partners, 2.1 is coming from the federal, and then our local match is about almost $303,000. What you have listed here is a number of items. We are buying 10 buses as a part of the $7.5 million. 2 of the buses are battery electric. That is part of our expansion. We have also 8 buses that are, 4 of them are 35-footers and 4 of them are 29-footers. Those vehicles will be diesel vehicles. One of the last purchases of the diesel fossil fuel that we agreed upon as as our transition. But this allows us to get the reliability in as we're starting to do that transition. The goal is to have this purchase. We will be making a PO for the battery electric vehicles in January. We are also very fortunate. We put in, we have pre-award authority, so we've actually already put in for the 8 diesel vehicles. We were told about 60 days ago that we were able to move up in the production line, and if all goes well, they will go to production at the end of January, and we will have buses, new buses here at the end of February, which is wonderful because normally it takes 2 years. So we put this in about about a year ago. So in theory, we would have another year to wait, but we were able to slide into the queue a little faster. So with that, I'll open it up for any questions.
Okay, before we open up the public hearing, we'll see if we have any questions or comments at this time from councilors.
Just a really basic question, just kind of help me understand in your funding mix, like what part of this, is this kind of like formula funding or formula combined with what you apply with, or is this inclusive of like money from the bipartisan infrastructure law and Inflation Reduction Act that gets filtered through FTA? I don't know if that makes sense, but.
Absolutely, great question. So this is all our formula funding money. This has zero to do with any of the discretionary grants that we will be applying for. So if I can bring your attention to, remember we were still in the process of completing our transition study. I took the opportunity and with great consultation with the city manager to take an opportunity to put in a request to do 2 battery electric buses. We were granted that even before we had our study complete, which is not normally what happens. So we were very fortunate to get that. So it just falls in line now that we got that as a part of our normal allocation. So they added it onto our normal 5307 money that comes from the feds. The state was very generous in matching significantly to the point of $2.1 million of it is coming directly from the state. There's a little bit that's coming from the feds, about $300,000. But with that portion there, we were able to actually buy the battery electric buses. And then our normal allocation, when buses came up for replacement, our rolling stock, we were able to replace the 8. So it's just normal.
And is it known which brand you'll be purchasing?
So we are Gillick Shop. On the battery electric ones, we did the demo day with Gillick. We've reached out to New Flyer 7 times. They were non-responsive. That is not a good sign when we were trying to order something from them. So what we are doing, so we gave them one more opportunity. We in our last email to them, I think it was either the last week of November or the first week of December, we told them that if we weren't hear from them, we were going to go ahead and move forward in January with our purchase. We have not heard back from them, so we are moving forward. That starts our clock, though, for the infrastructure that needs to be done. So, all things have to come together before we have the infrastructure necessary to run the battery electric vehicles.
Yeah, and I think I saw Arlington purchased Gillick, I think. But
great
yeah,
vehicles, though. Great vehicles. A little heavier than the New Flyers, but they're still great vehicles.
Yeah. I'm sure you're all on top of it. I'm just very curious in terms of the money available for the infrastructure, what happens after January 20, but we'll see.
We're all eagerly waiting and anticipating what will happen, but we're gonna still continue to look for as many discretionary grants as we possibly can.
Thank you.
So this funding does include a component for infrastructure or not?
So it's entitled under infrastructure, but there's no infrastructure in this part of the.
This is purely for rolling stock?
This is mostly rolling stock and some equipment. So
Okay.
we're getting software improvements for our AVL. We're getting some support vehicles to support our normal operations, some cameras for some vehicles, a tire machine,
Okay.
a hydraulic press, those sorts of things.
But
that
the
are
work for
necessary.
the actual chargers and so on would be separate and later?
That would be separate.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
We've got to get through some steps before we're in a position to get the chargers in.
Understood.
Those will all start, though, by the way, in January. So the survey starts in January, and then our NEPA process will start at the end of January.
Lloyd?
I got nothing.
My only suggestion is waiving a second reading.
No.
Well, let's have, if there's no other comments right now, can we have now we'll open up the public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak on this? If not, I'll close the public hearing, and it will be on the next agenda. It sounds like it can be on the consent agenda item.
I think so.
It's good for me.
Okay. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is report on the annual financial audit for fiscal '24 from the city's auditor.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I'm Chris
Good evening.
Cullinan, the city's Director of Finance. This is the report on the annual financial audit for fiscal year 2024 from the city's auditors. Before I begin my presentation of this agenda item, I'd like to publicly introduce Mr. Charles Clemmer. He's the city's new comptroller. Charles has been with us for about 6 months now. He oversees all the accounting functions, accounts payable, payroll, sort of the business functions of the city. He joined us from the city of Buena Vista, where he worked for about 10 years, most recently as their Director of Finance. So Charles, welcome. As part of my introduction of this agenda item, the city manager asked me to provide some extended comments about the rationale and scope of the annual audit. Just starting at the big picture level, the overall objective of the audit is to obtain reasonable assurance from a neutral third party about whether the city's financial statements and position as a whole are free from material misstatements or mistakes. And as for the rationale, there are really two that come to mind immediately. First of all, it's a legal requirement. The Code of Virginia requires local governments to contract with an external independent public accounting firm to perform their annual financial audit. This requirement is echoed in both the city charter and city code. And as a recipient of funds from the federal government and the Commonwealth, the city is also required to conduct what is called a single audit, which examines compliance on the administration and use of these funds. The second rationale is accountability and transparency of the use of public funds. The process helps demonstrate to taxpayers, citizens, and to other stakeholders such as bond rating agencies, bondholders, et cetera, that the city is managing its public resources responsibly. The audit also helps myself and my team identify areas where improvements may be necessary in promoting better financial management practices. The scope of the audit includes a thorough review of the city's financial statements, including its balance sheet statement, income statements, and cash flow statements. The auditor verifies that these financial statements are prepared in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, or GAAP, GAAP. You might see that in some other places, and ensures that it fairly represents the city's financial position and performance. The audit also involves testing a sample of transactions to ensure they have been properly recorded and comply with applicable laws and regulations. And in addition to reviewing the financial statements, the audit examines the design of the city's internal controls to ensure that they are appropriate. And so that's what's within the scope, but I also just want to briefly mention what's not in the scope of the audit. It doesn't evaluate the efficiency or effectiveness of the government operations beyond the financial realm. The audit also does not assess the quality of public service policy decisions or long-term financial planning. It also does not provide a detailed review of all individual transactions. As I previously mentioned, it's a sample. The city does easily several hundreds of thousands of transactions a year, so examining each one of them individually would be impractical, and instead they use a sampling technique to test representative portions of transactions, also more material ones in terms of the size of those transactions, to inform their conclusions. The results of the audit are summarized in an audit report, which includes the auditor's opinion on the financial statements. And with that, I'd like to segue to introduce Mr. Michael Lupton from the firm of Robinson Farmer Cox & Associates, who will make his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris, for that great summary. You nailed the head there, so that was awesome. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. My name is Michael Lupton, as Chris mentioned. I'm one of the partners in charge of the audit for the City of Charlottesville. And there are just a couple of items I would like to add to Chris's comments here, most notably the requirements that what we're required to convey to you all as the governing body. The first of which is what we call our governance letter. And one of the main points of that is to distinguish the difference between management's responsibilities and the auditor's responsibilities. Management is responsible for the financial statements. They're responsible for the preparation and the fair presentation of the financial statements. Management is also responsible for maintaining a system of internal controls relevant to the preparation and fair presentation of the financial statements, again in accordance with, as Chris mentioned, generally accepted accounting principles. Our responsibility as auditors is to perform the audit in accordance with professional standards and ultimately to obtain sufficient and appropriate audit evidence to render an opinion on those financial statements. So with that being said, there are other items listed in our governance letter for significant audit matters, the first of which relates to accounting estimates. Estimates are used in almost all financial statements, and the city is no exception. They are integral to most financial statements in that they estimate future events. The downside to that, or potential downside, is that they are subject to sensitivity. The future events that occur may be different than the expectations that are set. That being said, the most notable accounting estimates are for the city that the city used for the FY24 financial statements are depreciable lives of capital assets, pension and OPEB liabilities, and actuarial information provided as part of that, and also the allowance for uncollectible property taxes. Second, difficulties encountered in performing the audit. I'm pleased to report that we encountered no difficulties when working with staff and performing the audit for the fiscal year 2024. Misstatements that were detected as part of the audit process were accepted and corrected by management throughout the audit process. Also, no disagreements with management to convey to you all at this time. And finally, no opinion shopping. We deem that to be a red flag, or our profession deems that to be a red flag when management seeks other opinions on audit matters and accounting matters. But I'm pleased to report that to our knowledge, there were no opinion shopping that occurred for the audit process for FY24. So I'd like to move now to our opinion on the financial statements. We will be issuing an unmodified opinion on the financial statements. That means that the financial statements as presented are materially correct in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. That is the best opinion that we can offer in our profession and is a clean opinion, as we like to say. But again, an unmodified opinion on the financial statements for the fiscal year 2024. So with that, I welcome any questions that you all have for me this time.
Did you have fun doing the audit?
It's a loaded question, isn't it? No, we had we work well with Chris and Charles and finance staff, and laughs were had, of course, but certainly diligent in performing the work, and I commend the city finance staff for providing information in a very timely manner for us, and having that in an organized manner that we can work through the audit process as efficient as possible.
Yeah. But no, in all seriousness, I feel like every year we get the audit and you think, of course, we're going to pass, but then you read statewide news and there's localities that don't or have issues, so it's very easily taken for granted, and I'm glad of the work of you and staff that's come out clear, but no questions.
Yeah, I was happy to hear of the unmodified opinion. But is there anything like, kind of on the horizon that if we don't pay attention, that you notice that, it's not an issue, but, we should, keep note of it?
Sure. I think that one thing to keep in mind going forward is the timing of state and federal reimbursement requests. Obviously, there are significant projects that the city undertakes, specifically relating to transportation. And that definitely is something that we want to keep in mind and stay cognizant of, that filing timely reimbursement requests for those projects is key in maintaining cash flow for those projects in general.
Any comments down here?
No, I don't have any. Thank you for coming to talk with us, and thank you for doing our audit. I'm glad that
Natalie,
we did so well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. Sure. You mentioned an allowance for uncollectible property taxes.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? How much is that usually? How does that happen? That sort of thing?
I would have to defer to Chris to speak about the specifics of that. But generally speaking, there is a consistent and historical precedence that is set for calculating that allowance. And essentially what that is, it's the amount that's estimated to be not collectible of the outstanding property taxes receivable, or the balances as of a certain fiscal year. And generally it's a mechanism of those balances over a certain aged over a certain period of time. Generally, that could be 90 or 180 days. But again, to speak on specifics, I'd have to defer to Chris on that.
Sure, thanks.
I get the exact number from Mr. Vandiver, our treasurer, but our collection rate is north of 99.5% on a regular basis. So it's, it's never 100%, but it's very, very close.
Is it mostly just like delays and people haven't done it yet by the time the audit happens?
It could be a whole host of reasons, including inability to pay, timing, that sort of thing. So,
but it's generally not a huge amount. Okay, thank you. And then you also mentioned that it's generally frowned upon to do opinion shopping. How come?
Well, just because, whenever there is a difference of opinion, obviously, it is something that needs to be addressed. However, if management is trying to seek other opinions to get to the right answer, that's when we are to be concerned. Because they're looking to get to the answer that they want to hear, not necessarily the answer that is correct in accordance with auditing standards or accounting standards.
So the idea is that it's not double checking your work, it's trying to make the stats fit the story you want to tell.
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Chris.
How many years have you done our auditing?
This is the third year.
And y'all are local?
We are.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you all so much.
If there's no more comments on that, we'll go to.
And actually, I do
I'm sorry.
just to close out this item. So, Michael gave you the verbal opinion this evening. We're still waiting to get it in writing, hopefully by the end of the week, if we finish up everything. And so once we get that written opinion, then we're able to publish the Annual Comprehensive Financial Report, or ACFR. We'll publish that on the city's website. We'll also have hard copies available as well for anybody who might desire a hard copy. We also need to file a series of reports with the Auditor of Public Accounts and some other both state and federal entities. And then the final action that we need to then sort of close the book, so to speak, on fiscal year 2024 is we'll be coming back to you in the near future with the year-end appropriation. That includes a series of housekeeping items to close it up, but also includes any recommendations regarding the year-end surplus. At this time, because the audit is not finished yet, we don't have that final number from our financials, and there's also a series of analyses that we have to do. And so we will be bringing that to you at that time as well. I am comfortable in saying that we did end FY24 with a surplus, but again, we need to let the audit process play out and get that final number. And then, like I said, we have some things that we need to do, but we will be bringing that back to you all with recommendations in the very near future.
Would it be possible for you to email us a copy of that when you get the final report?
Oh, absolutely.
Otherwise, I'll forget to go check the website.
Yeah, I can be glad to do that.
Okay, thank you. The next item we have on the agenda is a resolution to reallocate the remaining, is that, you mentioned that, but you still need to.
That's him. That's
Okay.
also his item.
Okay. To allocate the unspent, unobligated American Rescue Act funds for eligible uses.
Good evening again, back to back. So this agenda item serves to obligate the city's remaining American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA funds, by the December 31st, 2024 deadline from the U.S. Treasury Department. So go back a little bit in history, but not dwell on it for too long. So ARPA was signed into law in the spring of 2021 to provide funding for state, local, and tribal governments in assisting individual and businesses affected by the coronavirus pandemic. In total, the city received about $19.6 million in two equal tranches in May 2021 and June of 2022. Since then, Council has made a series of appropriations, appropriating all of those funds for roughly 50-plus projects supporting a number of eligible uses. The ARPA legislation contained two deadlines for using the funds. The first, as I just mentioned, is the end of this calendar year, which is to obligate the funds for eligible uses, and then December 31st, 2026 to fully expend those funds. And so when we talk about obligating funds, what that means is that we have a formal obligation to pay, either on a purchase order or a contract, a memorandum of understanding, something like that. The Treasury guidance is very clear that an appropriation does not meet that criteria. And so as we've been working with these funds for a number of years now, we've spent approximately $13.5 million of our ARPA funds, about 69% of the total. Of the remaining funds, about $2.4 million has already been obligated per U.S. Treasury guidelines, which leaves a balance of about $3.7 million of unspent and unobligated funds, and that's the subject of this agenda item. And so in the resolution itself, there's a detailed listing of projects which have unspent and unobligated balances. I'm not going to read through each of them individually, but to just give you some idea of kind of how these balances came to be. In some cases, these are projects which we undertook and are finished, and there's a leftover balance. You can see some fairly small amounts there in different places. In some cases, they were projects that the original estimate, the actual costs were much less than were originally estimated. Again, when we received these funds, and in the throes of the pandemic, we were making some of our best guesses as to what the scope and cost of some of these things were. And then some of these projects are just simply things that just didn't happen. And it was for a number of reasons. As you look at some of these, you might chuckle a little bit and say, oh, we were going to do take-home COVID tests for city employees. But again, in 2021, 2022, tests were not readily available. And so there was a thought at that time that we should undertake something like that. But as the pandemic and the response to the pandemic evolved, those tests became more readily available at Walgreens, CVS, et cetera, so that project never really happened. And so again, you can see those projects detailed there. And so the proposal is that these funds be reallocated. Again, they've already been appropriated, so we're asking you for we're asking you to reallocate these, and then we will obligate these funds before the end of the calendar year. The roughly $3.7 million are for two uses. First one is $3 million for the Salvation Army Center of Hope, which is their facility on Ridge Street, to both expand and renovate that. This is a part of their capital campaign, part of a kickoff. I believe that, Sam, the total project is something like $22 million in total. So this is sort of a upfront investment to hopefully leverage additional dollars to get that project going. And then the second piece is the balance of those funds to reimburse the city's general fund specifically for eligible public safety payroll expenses that we've incurred since July 1. This is a very similar approach that we used back in 2020, to go way back, when we had CARES funds. Again, that was sort of the first round of COVID relief money from Washington. We did a very similar thing and had to do something very similar at the end of calendar year 2020 to fully utilize those funds. And what that does is it allows for us to reimburse ourselves for eligible uses, to use up those funds. It also then creates for lack of a better term, a surplus in our general fund. We're replacing our general fund dollars with these federal dollars. And so again, this is a very similar approach to, as Mr. Sanders and I have both told you on several occasions, we have no intention of sending money back to Washington. And so this allows us to use those funds in this way. And this figure, in the memo, you'll see a figure of $759,774.43. I will tell you that number will likely change a little bit because as we go through the end of this month, we'll be paying some bills, finalizing some projects. So that number may fluctuate a little bit, but this is definitely in the ballpark. And so it does note that in the discussion, but I just want to draw that to your attention that number may change slightly, but not materially. And so with that, that concludes my presentation. Mr. Sanders, I'm not sure if you wanted to add anything to it.
So I just want to also state that this is for the general public's benefit of appreciating this ARP item. This $3 million is about the Ridge Street, the existing Ridge Street property only. That is the project that is scheduled for a significant expansion. As a part of the recommendation that I made to council in October, there's more money involved in both facilities that is still to be determined as to source and council's commitment to those items, because I have simply made a recommendation We are at this moment prioritizing $3 million of that recommendation being fulfilled through this action for the Ridge Street property. And the strategy behind it for me specifically is, as I've talked to Chris about all of this, with the change in administration, these are federal funds. There's always a clawback available for any money that's not spent to be pulled back. By doing this and doing it now, that won't happen with $3 million of this money. And the intent would be that we would move forward with an agreement with the Salvation Army that these funds have to go towards the expansion of that facility, and that would be their commitment to receive the funds.
So you all are planning to actually sign an MOU or something between now and the end of the year? Okay, correct, all right.
Likewise, I mean, for the benefit of the community, you state that $3 million is for the high barrier shelter on the existing Ridge Street site. In addition, that roughly $700,000 for reimbursement, that's for money that's already been spent, correct?
Correct.
So it's not any new expenditures, but it's basically freeing up additional money for our upcoming budget discussions.
Yes. Which there are already many, as you well know.
Any other discussion on this? If not,
I just wanted to say, Mr. Collin, I think you've done a really great job helping us navigate all of this over the course of I've been on council 3 years. I know you were doing that even before that point, but I feel like that we've used these funds for the community in the best possible ways. And I think a lot of that credit goes to you, so thank you.
I have one question. Separate from the list of the unobligated amounts, you mentioned that there's also an amount that's obligated but unspent. Has there been an analysis of if anything's jumping out in terms of possible problems of how easy it may be to spend that money before the deadline or spend it as quickly as possible, even though it's obligated? Are there any potential problems?
Over the last few months, we have asked that question just because it's obligated. Then, as you just mentioned, the next deadline's 2 years away, which again seems somewhat far off, but it's really not. And so I'm confident that that approximately $2.4 million that we have, that we can execute on those, and that there are already contracts written obligating those funds or memorandum of understanding. So again, having that, more than just appropriate, actually obligated, gives me a lot of confidence that we'll be able to get that done.
Now, I'd be curious just to know it's not immediately necessary, but I'd be curious just to know what they are, because it's obviously a significant amount of money.
The two that I can tell you off the top of my head, there's a couple $100,000 for what's called success factors. It's the city's implementation of a human resources management information system, or HRMIS, that's been sorely needed for a while now. I think Mr. Sanders refers to it as part of modernizing our human resources function. This is actually a tool and a system that allows us to do that. That's a fairly large expenditure. We also have some money that was set aside for safe routes to schools, and they've got several contracts written. They're going to utilize bits and pieces of that money. Those are the two that jump immediately to mind, but we can provide a list of those.
And I'll also share that as Chris was working with all staff who are managing individual awards, they've not only been reminded by him that they had to confirm for him that they could deliver on expending these funds, because once we pass the December 31st deadline, I can't move it to anything else. We have to spend it in that appropriate category. We might be able to adjust exactly how it goes out depending on how loosely we may have written an agreement, but what we said it was for is what it's for, and that's a commitment. So I also came behind Chris and said to everyone, do not make me send anything back to the federal government, because I don't like to do that. So that has been expressed strongly, and when I looked at the list, I did feel comfortable about what I saw, but part of what I also was looking for in trying to clear as much of this money as soon as possible, that was the stressing point that I have, is should a clawback occur, it goes back to the federal government, but whatever it is that we were planning to do doesn't disappear. It still needs to possibly be done, and in some instances, as Chris just gave you the example of success factors, I need that program. Like, I can't afford for there to be a clawback and not have the money to fix it. So I have said to the budget team that we also need to make sure that we're thinking about how do we have resources available to offset any potential loss that might occur, because it's possible that something could get pulled back. We just don't know.
Thank you.
So trying to plan for that as well.
Okay. Is there a motion?
I would move the resolution to reallocate remaining unspent, unobligated American Rescue Plan Act ARPA funds for eligible uses as outlined in the packet.
Second?
Second, can we vote, please? The motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Sam and Chris. I appreciate you, sir. Thank you so much. Chris. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is to approve the City of Charlottesville initial membership in the Charlottesville Albemarle Regional Transit Authority, and Ben is here. And
Yep. Good evening, Council. Ben Chambers. I'm the Transportation Planning Manager with the city. I'm here to bring a resolution for the city to join the Regional Transit Authority as one of its initial members. Before we jump into our presentation, I'd like to introduce our partner over at the county, Deputy County Executive Ann Wall. She's going to take us through the first few slides. I'll follow up with the last few, and then we can answer any questions you have before you vote on this resolution. So, Ann, take it away.
Good evening. Ann Wall, Deputy County Executive, Albemarle County. As Ben indicated, Ben and I will provide this presentation. It's important to point out that this effort has been a partnership between the city, the county, and the TJPDC, and staff, particularly Lucinda Shannon and Christine Jacobs. We have also met several times with our transit partners, including representatives from CAT, JAUNT, and UTS. We wanted to start off by talking a little bit about how we got here, what's really the history of this effort. In 2008, the Charlottesville-Albemarle Regional Transit Report explored the formation of a regional transit authority. The authority was intended to promote the development of regional transit services with the goal of providing travelers with an attractive alternative to driving on increasingly congested roadways throughout the Charlottesville-Albemarle area. In 2009, the General Assembly passed legislation to enable the formation of a regional transit authority. The legislation, however, did not include state authorization for revenue generation. In 2016, the Regional Coordination Study explored opportunities to improve communication, coordination, and collaboration among transit partners. This effort and ensuing study resulted in the development of the Regional Transit Partnership, which was intended to serve as a precursor to a transit authority. In 2022, the Regional Transit Vision Plan was prepared. Local leaders, transit agencies, and a wide variety of stakeholders collaborated to develop a clear vision for the future of high-quality transit in the region. The Regional Transit Vision Plan identified short-term, long-term, and extended long-term actions that the community must take to support the community's vision for high-quality transit. The first step in achieving the vision was the initiation of the Transit Governance Study, which really guided the governance structure around a regional transit authority and looked at likely revenue sources and key funding sources. And finally, fast forward to 2024, the Transit Governance Study recommended that the region initiate the formation of a transit authority envisioned in the 2009 legislation. It recommended early discussions regarding regional planning efforts with the idea of a shared vision, establishing bylaws, engaging rural localities, and engaging transit partnerships. The 2009 legislation required an act of the City of Charlottesville as well as Albemarle County to enact the authority. And the item before the council this evening is the consideration of a resolution for the City of Charlottesville to consider membership in the Charlottesville-Albemarle Regional Transit Authority. And finally, we just wanted to remind the board of the role of a regional transit authority. First is that authority is intended to serve as a collaborative, multi-jurisdictional entity for identifying and solving transit issues. It is intended to provide long-range transit planning for the region, to recommend transit priorities, to advocate for those transit needs to both our state and federal partners, to apply for grants and other funding, and finally, to serve as a vehicle for administering and potentially collecting dedicated regional transit funding that might become available.
All right, so that was sort of the background of how we got to this year, and now I'm going to talk about sort of what we've been engaged in over the past year. So the transit governance study came out at the beginning of the year and said we should set up a regional transit authority. And when that study came out, the Regional Transit Partnership turned to us as staff and said, can you please help us figure out what are the next steps for this? How do we get this to actually being an authority? So our first step was talking to the other localities that aren't represented at the Regional Transit Partnership directly. So we reached out to the surrounding rural localities. We also reached out to UVA leadership and to the transit agencies in the region to get their sense of what could this authority do to benefit them, and how can we potentially collaborate in the future. We've also been working on drafting bylaws that are in conformance with the CARTA legislation, and a couple months ago we held a joint meeting between the City of Charlottesville and Albemarle County. You all were there. You may recognize some of these slides. They are familiar from that presentation. So looking at the bylaws, we wanted to make sure that it was aligned with the legislation. That's kind of the point of setting up this authority. It's the difference between the partnership and the authority is that it has legislation that lays out exactly what it's supposed to be. So our legislation describes what the powers are for a regional transit authority. Largely that is focused on planning. It can also be focused on funding, but right now we're looking at it primarily being a planning agency of some sort. It initially identifies the members as the City of Charlottesville and Albemarle County. It also says that Fluvanna, Greene, Louisa, and Nelson can come along as partners. We have had conversations with them, and they'd like to see how we pull this together ourselves first before jumping in with us, but there is still interest in watching to see how this progresses and seeing if there's an opportunity for them to join in the future. Legislatively and through the draft bylaws, we want to enable that, make sure that that is going to be feasible. There are other duties and responsibilities that are described. There are technical committees, finance committees, sort of roles within the board that are described in that bylaws and within the legislation. And so our bylaws are reflecting that legislation, and they'll be put before the board in their first meeting for consideration. So going forward, what is CARTA going to be doing is kind of the next question, right? In general, it's going to be setting up CARTA. That's sort of the initial work of CARTA is approving bylaws, electing chairs and vice chairs, designating committees, continuing that outreach work to other participating jurisdictions, potentially participating jurisdictions, and seeing if there's a potential to expand CARTA. It would also be looking at planning, figuring out what the region's transit goals are together with the city and the county sitting at the table together, pulling together our planning work. Considering our transit improvements and services and customer services that could be implemented at any of our transit agencies in the region. We'd also be looking at what is CARTA doing in the next fiscal year, how much funding are they going to need in order to carry out their work. Right now we're looking at a lot of the work of CARTA going forward being done with city and county and TJPDC staff. But over the next year or so, we're going to need to evaluate, is there a need for additional funding, additional resources for this agency? Preparing a grant application is one thing that CARTA is going to be useful for going forward. We are actually, as a next step, going to be coming back to you in January for a grant application that would support CARTA and would provide it consultant support to study what its priorities out of the Transit Vision Plan would be going forward. In the future, we would want CARTA itself to be applying for those, but since it's not formally sat yet, TJPDC will be doing that on its behalf, and we'll be bringing that to you in January, along with some other transportation items. And lastly, CARTA is going to be filling sort of a role of making sure that we're coordinating with the state and federal government about what our regional needs are for transportation. Right now, a lot of that's done at sort of the agency and jurisdiction level, and we'll have a place where we can do that together. That's going to be important, especially if we are going to be using this as a vehicle for bringing in additional funding in the future. Currently, our legislation does not allow CARTA to do that, but if we are able to sort of get together what our legislative priorities are and work together as a region, we would be able to do that through CARTA and figure out how to apply that in a future legislative session with the state government. So the key takeaways that we've learned over the past 15 years, we have a lot of needs, a lot of different needs across our region, and we have a lot of different providers providing the transit that fills that need. We know that we need more funding for transit going forward. We need to continuously improve the services that we have currently. And right now, we're at a new opportunity for having that conversation. For about 15 years, we've been saying we want to have this authority. There have been some opportunities in the past that we've tripped up on a little bit, trying to figure out, all right, if we have this authority, what are the relationships between the agencies? What are the relationships between the jurisdictions? And we sort of made those discussions preliminary to having an authority. The thing that's making us successful this time around is that we realize we need to have those conversations, but we can have them under the umbrella of the authority itself. So what this authority is giving us is a table to sit down at, so that we can collectively, city, county, and all the various transit agencies, decide what we need for transit going forward and figuring out how we resolve some of those questions between the agencies and the jurisdictions. So the next steps would be voting for this motion. You don't have to use this language exactly, but this is basically what the county voted on. They passed this motion last Wednesday at their Board of Supervisors meeting. Once you've passed this, we are now a member of CARTA. That means we'll need to come back in January and name some members from City Council to serve on CARTA. We'll also need an endorsement of the grant application that TJPDC will be going after in January as well. That's a DRPT application. Their grant cycle ends at the end of January, so it'll be a bit of a tight turnaround for us, but we'll be back in January with more. And with that,
Okay.
any questions?
Thank you. Lloyd, I'll start with you, sir.
I don't have any questions. I've been
Yeah,
following this
oh,
for
yeah,
a couple
you've
of
been-
years with the
yeah.
transit partnership, so.
I'll just,
Yeah, same here. I want to, again, point out the folks from TJPDC all done just an amazing job, and staff as well. This has been a long time coming, and I think good things are going to come from it. I think it's a great example of what we can do when we work closely with the county. And I know that Supervisor McKeel probably was bouncing for joy when this was approved last week, so.
Michael?
Yeah, no questions. Just likewise, I know there's still a long way to go, but I think this is still a historic and important moment, because the only way we'll get a transit system where the majority of people see it as a feasible alternative to driving is with Charlottesville, Albemarle, and the region closely collaborating and sharing resources. I would just add, I know there's differences of opinion, but I think we need to start having the conversation around how we will fund it immediately and think about how we interface with the General Assembly about that. I could see that taking multiple sessions and taking a while for even Charlottesville and Albemarle to align on what kind of revenue mechanism we would want. And likewise, I think UVA's participation will be vital, because I could see that doubling ridership and the amount of money we get. And I think it'll have, its ultimate impact will be limited as long as EVA is not fully at the table with us. And yeah, just appreciate all the work of county, city staff, planning district commission, and I have to shout out as well Paul Long, who always ran since 2008 as outsider independent, but for a decade he ran always a transit authority as his top issue and kept the flame alive, at least in Charlottesville City Council elections for regional transit authority. So shouts out to Paul Long.
Yeah. Natalie, you have anything?
No, I'm also quite familiar with it from RTP. So yes, thank you very much to all of the hard work that TJPDC has done and the great collaboration between Ann and Ben and everybody working so hard towards this, because it feels like for a lot of people the first step, but I know there's been so many steps leading up to it. So thanks for outlining that and for getting us going and keeping us going.
Yeah, I support it as well. When you talked about the 2008, 2009, I was doing planning for the county at that time. As a matter of fact, Ann Malik and I probably had, and look at us now, we're both on Board of Supervisors and City Council, so it takes time. So you want to bring that resolution, that proposed language back up? Or
Remy,
you have it?
you got that?
I've got it.
You got it.
Yeah.
I think we're ready.
I move to adopt the attached resolution entitled Resolution to Approve the City of Charlottesville's Initial Membership in the Charlottesville-Albemarle Regional Transit Authority.
Second.
Okay, can we vote? All right, we're
Thank
part
you.
of it. Thank you guys so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you. Okay, the next item is ordinance for parking of buses, trucks between midnight and 6 a.m. And we've had a couple of kind of, not work sessions, but
Iterations.
there you
Yeah.
go. Yes. I think we may be ready, but
sorry.
we heard that. we
sorry.
heard
Brennan Duncan, city engineer, and yeah, this is, I believe, the third time in as many council meetings that I've been here before you to talk about this. I believe between myself and city attorney's office, we've condensed all of the comments that we've received from
That's
you
what
all.
this is?
Yep, so I just passed out a copy. I highlighted in there kind of what we've changed from comments, either from staff or from yourself. I'll highlight those and then we can discuss if you need. I did kind of officially put in there that section that I spoke about, the very first one, about exempting anyone who's obtained the parking permit from the city for any of these uses. We've included all
I'm
of
sorry,
the.
could you hold a second?
Mm-hmm.
What paragraph was that?
It should be highlight the number 1, where it has, however, this section shall not apply to a vehicle that has obtained a parking permit from the city.
Thank you.
For the semi-trucks and trailers, the recreational vehicles, trailers, we added either the state code section for the definition or the city code section for the definition. To get to, I guess, the heart of what was talked about of kind of the egregious vehicles, we left the RV and trailer, but we put in the excess of 20 feet in length, just because there's not a lot of dually RVs out there, but a lot of the larger ones are just, and we use 20 feet because 22 is kind of the standard parallel parking space in the city, so that kind of gives 1 foot on either side. So basically saying that any vehicle that's larger than a on-street parking space would be in there for that. As well as in paragraph 3, comments that Lloyd had was just to separate out and kind of bullet those items in there for clarity more than none of the content changed. It was just a formatting issue there that we changed, so.
Okay. Yeah. Can I make some comments? Thank you for this. I think this is really close and maybe actually final, but I do have a few more questions. And are we going to need to read this aloud into the record if okay, we can do that in a second. So on the second page, you've struck the whole piece, 15-44.
Yeah, that was all that's the original code section
Okay.
that's in our city code right now.
Okay, the section, and you've got the piece about the tarp.
Yes, that's paragraph 2 in the.
Okay, so
new proposed.
1.a, I guess, semi-truck or semi-trailer as defined by, so we know that is like some large beast of a vehicle. Bus, number B, letter B. C is antique, D is the farm use, E is the boat. We got squared there. G, any vehicle or trailer with more than 2 wheels per axle.
Correct.
So I still have a little bit of question about F, sorry. So I did look in the definitions in the city code, which is a very interesting place to peruse. The language there really had to do with RVs and like floodplains. And the sort of, I don't know, what it's 400 square feet or something of it. Is that really even relevant? I guess you want to include it because it's part of the city code.
Right, it was just, I felt like if we have a definition of RV in the city code, we should be using that one. And there are a few other kind of more restrictive statements in the city code for the RV than there are in the state code.
So you think that something like a pop-up camper
that would still,
12
again,
feet long.
it's no pop-up camper is going to be 20 feet long.
Okay. And a trailer for someone who needs to haul their trash around, or they've got a small business or whatever.
Yeah.
Should be well below.
I did
20
some
feet.
research. Most trailers that are over the 20 feet will also probably reach that kind of 2 wheels per axle
Dually
as well.
thing.
But in the event that there isn't, I mean, it is possible that you could, have 6 axles on a trailer to spread that weight and be over the 20 feet, but not have the dually. So we're just trying to cover our bases there with, kind of limiting the size of this to a single parking space.
Okay, I think that's fair. I'm willing to vote for this.
Any other comments or questions? If not, can we get a motion?
I know I'm alone, but I'll just say I think it would have made a lot more sense to look at this in parking zones throughout the city and to isolate specific geographic areas where this is presenting an actual problem versus where at the moment it's not. I think if that was the approach, or if you're talking about even narrowing roads to make off-street parking less feasible, I would be fine with that. But this is much better than before, but again, even informally this weekend, I mean, there are several vehicles that would still violate this in areas where parking is just not ever an issue. And I just don't see why we're providing a basis for the city to fine and harass them in an area where parking is just never an issue. And at least from what I could tell, I mean, even with there's far fewer in terms of 2 wheels per axles, but there's still people who are using it for manual labor jobs, or older people who have an antique vehicle in areas where maybe a duplex is the main type of housing, and on-street parking where it is never limited is just a default.
Nothing prohibits somebody who has an antique plate from just getting a regular plate for their vehicle either. So like if you can't park an antique vehicle and that's your vehicle, just go to the DMV and get a regular license plate.
Yeah, and I see this.
There.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. I see this maybe as like a kind of opening salvo or conversation as we do the development work and have more density. I would anticipate, Michael, that there would be more conversations about parking permitting throughout the city and zones, and I hope y'all are thinking that way.
That is a direction, but we're just not there yet. So.
I mean, I echo some of Michael's, but I think at this point we've
Call the question.
Okay, do I need to read this, Madam Clerk?
That would be my
Okay.
understanding, because what was in the packet was different from what's handed out.
I'll read
There
it.
is a clean version in the packet.
It's different.
This is
It's different?
This,
Okay.
this is different.
This is revised a bit. Some of the changes I proposed last night.
Got it.
Okay.
Okay,
I'm
thanks.
Mr. Mayor?
Please.
Okay. An ordinance to amend City Codes, Chapter 15, Section 144. Whereas certain areas within the city of Charlottesville have limited on-street parking, which is further exacerbated by the parking of large vehicles or inoperable vehicles on city streets, semicolon, and whereas currently Section 15-144 of the Code of the City of Charlottesville prohibits the parking of certain vehicles on city streets between the hours of midnight and 6 a.m., including buses or vans designed to carry more than 12 passengers, trucks, vans, trailers, semi-trailers, or recreational vehicles with more than 2 wheels per axle. And whereas the current version of City Code Section 15-144 does not prohibit certain other large vehicles and does not prohibit the practice of covering or tarping vehicles such that city staff is unable to determine whether a vehicle is inoperable. And whereas the revised version of City Code 15-144 seeks to prohibit the overnight parking of certain other large vehicles, including boats, vehicles with antique plates, and vehicles for farm use, and seeks to prohibit the practice of covering or tarping cars in a manner that restricts inspection of the license plate or state inspection decal. Therefore, be it ordained by the Council of the City of Charlottesville, Virginia, that Chapter 15, Motor Vehicles and Traffic, Section 144 of the Code of the City of Charlottesville, 1990, as amended, is hereby amended and reenacted as follows. So there's Section 15-144, the paragraph here that's struck from the text. I don't think I have to read that, Madam Clerk. And then the revised language is this, Section 15-144 revised. Parking and covering of restricted vehicles. 1, no vehicle or trailer listed below shall be parked on any of the public streets of the city between the hours of midnight and 6 a.m. However, this section shall not apply to a vehicle that has obtained a parking permit from the city. A, semi-truck or semi-trailer as defined by Virginia Code Section 46.2-1500. B, bus or van designed to carry more than 12 passengers, city school buses and vans accepted. C, vehicle with antique license plate. D, vehicle with F-tag license plate or farm use placard. E, boat. F, recreational vehicle as defined by City Code Section 34-1200, or trailer as defined by Virginia Code Section 46.2-1500, in excess of 20 feet in length. G, any vehicle or trailer with more than 2 wheels per axle. 2, no vehicle or trailer parked on a public street of the city shall be covered with a tarp or cover that restricts inspection of the vehicle's or trailer's license plate or state inspection decal. 3, it shall be unlawful for any person, business, or corporation to perform service or repairs on a vehicle parked on a public street within the city or to store or park on any public street any motor vehicle left in the custody of any business, provided, however, that this section shall not apply to A, emergency service or repairs, B, vehicle owners performing minor service or repairs on the respective vehicles otherwise legally parked and operative, or C, the accommodation for the immediate transfer, exchange, or removal of a vehicle to or from a garage, repair shop, service station, or parking facility. So I move that we adopt this document as I just read.
Can I make one suggestion? There's a missing comma.
Where?
After service station, before or, if we want to continue the Oxford
What
comma
paragraph?
pattern through. 3C. On the bottom of the second page, service station, comma, or
Oxford
parking
comma that can
facility.
be there or not.
It's everywhere else, so I didn't know if we wanted to.
A removal
stay
of a
consistent.
vehicle,
To or from a garage, repair or shop, service station, comma, or parking
okay,
facility.
service station, comma, okay. As amended. I move that.
Was it did someone second that?
I'll second it as amended.
Okay. Can we vote, please? Okay, the motion passes 4-1. Thank you.
Thank you.
Third time's the charm, I guess.
Yeah. The next item on the agenda is a resolution for revisions to the Architecture Design Control District Design Guidelines, Chapter 5, for Section E for the outdoor cafes. Jeff?
That's, we'll see if Mr. Pinkston can read all 6 pages into the, sorry. Jeff Werner, the city's preservation and design planner. This is a continuation of a discussion y'all had on November 18th this year, and I can re-summarize, but I suspect you want to get going. So what can I help you with?
Yeah.
So it seems to me like Councilor Oshrin doesn't seem like I know has spent a lot of time parsing this. And I read your feedback earlier things, the feedback you had seemed to me to be reasonable and thoughtful. I wonder, Mr. Mayor, if it would just make sense for Council Oshrin to just go through the points where she has some deviation or a different idea compared to what the BIR stated, and she could just go down point by point, and if we were all basically okay with it, if we could just approve that sort of as a bulk item.
Yeah, you didn't have a lot this time, did you?
No, I basically took the chart that I had sent over last time and put it in Word format in the actual ordinance.
I think that's a good idea.
Okay, so I get to read it.
Well, the question is, where are we still
Well, I would-
in disagreement?
I will say for me personally, I am still prepared to vote for what the BAR recommended. For any adjustments, I would really like the BAR or staff to have an opportunity to provide a perspective on those points, because I just feel like there's things I feel like maybe I could be missing a context or a reason, or how something fits into national guidelines in terms of this being on the National Historic Register. So that's where I'm at.
So I think they did that when they sent that document over the other day with answers to most of the questions that I had, which was super helpful. That provided a lot of context. The other point that I want to make is there are some
So,
DV.
I'm sorry, Natalie,
Yeah.
is that correct, Jeff?
As far as it being helpful, I hope so. But yes, it was, this is.
Sort of, Ms. Brown, maybe
Yeah,
you'd be interested.
It's a
I mean,
difficult issue to put into bullet points, but we did our best to kind of summarize the progression of what's the BAR's filter and how do they look at things. So yeah, I think it.
So I thought that was pretty thorough and,
Okay, I just
and
wanna be sure.
comprehensive, yeah. So one of the points that I also wanted to make was there are some deviations to the proposed BAR adjustments that we are waiving. We're letting them, like if they, like, for example, Citizen Burger has, their surround is more solid than the BAR recommended, but they're allowing them to keep it. So with that in mind, I also want to point out that we got the historic designation in February of 2024, which means that the current state of affairs was already approved and seen. I mean, I know we talked about in our call, that's not exact, they don't come and specifically look at it, they look at the design intent, but if we were down some egregious path, that might not have happened. So with that in mind, some of those deviations were already accepted. So, and some of these are negotiation points, these are not, these are just conversation starters. So on page, where are we? Page 3. First suggestions for materials in color, wrought iron or metal only, or black or silver tone only. I had suggested changing that to preferred. Just in case.
Those are fine. If somebody wants to do something else, it goes to the BAR, so
That pretty much stays
Yep.
the same?
I'm good with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, bar height counters should not be located at the railing so as to create a visual barrier. That was in the design section.
rationale for that is, and I have photos if you all are interested, but the bars, the high bars that are on the mall tend to be solid. And so just like with the concern of pushing tables against the railings that are form a solid wall, the idea was that we wouldn't be pushing and in hindsight, there's ways to, it leaves some flexibility, but it's something to work with an applicant on, that we're not pushing that solid edge to the perimeter of the space, and maybe it's within the space. Again, the idea being if someone wants to do something different, they go to the BAR, but that gives me.
And I guess I'm thinking here, could we say if it has a solid under, we're already not in allowing solid underoos, so.
That's underneath furniture. We're just trying to, people like to parse the language. That's why we tried to address the different types of furniture, just so we're not.
And I'm comfortable waiving that. I can undo that if that makes people happier.
I don't have very strong opinions
Yeah.
about this, except, honor the perspective they bring and the fact that you actually worked out there.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
if we wanted
It doesn't preclude them, yeah.
Okay, so you
All
turn
right.
that off.
Yeah. Serving counters, what is the difference between a serving counter and something else?
So on the mall, you've now got, and on Remy, if you've got what I sent you the second, if you'd like to see images, but you've got, no, it's the other one. You've got shelves, you've got host stands, you've got cabinets, different kinds of things. We're just, again, trying to say, somebody will go, well, that's not the thing that it is. Yeah, that's it, Remy, and then go down, go down 2 or 3 slides, keep going. So there's sort of, we've got shelves, host stand, cabinets, service counter, and just trying to, so someone doesn't say, well, that's a something else.
Okay, so kind of tool counters.
Yeah.
Like workspaces.
And if you want a different word for it, we're all for it, so.
I wasn't sure if it was like a bar where someone is standing behind doing service, or if it's, I just
Okay, I
wasn't sure
understand.
what that meant. So let me get rid of that note, because that was just a question. So I had crossed out muted colors here because I wasn't sure what that was applying to. Like, to me, it does, like, the host stand and the storage cabinets, those feel more like furniture, so keeping that in the black and silver tone makes sense. But if, like, that top left curlicue shelf was like hot pink, I think that's fun, and I don't really care. If that's, tied to, like, the beach theme bar, like that's fine.
Yeah, I think it'd be fine if that simply, it kind of goes to, the default is all elements generally, the black or silver tone. If you want something else, come and talk to the BAR.
Yeah.
So you're wanting to delete the 2 words, muted colors.
Well,
I don't have a problem with that.
Okay.
Okay, great, thanks. Just, if furniture, black, silver tone, the little shelves there don't feel as furniture-like to me.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah. Rolling carts permitted, but not higher than 36 inches, but then we want, like, that cabinet, for example, could be allowed if it was rolled in at the end of the night, but that's taller than 36 inches.
So, go to, Remy, the next slide. So the issue here is, we do have some rolling cabinets that are being used out there, and they're fine. They go in at the end of the day, but you can buy much taller things that go out, and even if they're only used while the cafe's open, it begins to form that wall. So that was that idea of the height. If it's a cabinet and it's going up and has solid back and doors, the preference is for shorter. If it's a shelf and it's open, then tall is okay. So that's sort of the rationale there.
Because then going back to the pictures we just had before with the,
Go back, Remy, go back
Remy,
one.
if you don't mind, sorry. I believe the lower left is Miller's?
That's, what am I thinking, man?
Hamilton's?
Hamilton's.
Okay.
And, yeah, that's been there a while. That is not going to have to go away. We're just saying that if someone comes into a new space and wants to do something like that, we would say no, or, has to meet the criteria.
So that would be allowed as a legacy, but someone new wouldn't be able to implement the same thing. My understanding was that we would have all of those allowed, but you would have to wheel it in at the end of the night.
No. And so this is the thing, when we get all this squared away, go out, we have an inventory of each space, see what you have. The BAR was very concerned that they're not, things have been established, and they want to be very reasonable. If you've got something that's there, it's a piece of furniture, and it's mix and match, to leave it. There's only a few things that will have to go away. But if someone wants to add a storage cabinet like that, we'll follow the guidelines, or have something that's rolling, follow the guidelines. And just so that we don't have things out there, again, beginning to form a wall.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that cabinet on the next page, was kind of just thinking, like, not having to bend over every time you need something is nice. But, okay, so I can I can move on from that one. Let me, and then if that does become a problem, we get feedback, maybe we review that.
Yeah, no one is currently using tall things, so it's not saying someone has to make something go away.
Okay. The next section is planters. Material and color, avoid bright colors is also for a planter. I mean, like, flowers are colorful, why can't the planter also be colorful?
We love colorful flowers. Again, the point is that the mall is the space, that's the public's domain. This is a public space, and so the design of the mall and the features of the mall should have the priority. We're not saying cafe spaces can't be decorative and can't do anything. We're allowing a lot of things in there, in fact, allowing things that hadn't occurred. But again, it's allowing the design of the mall to be the space that's important, that has the priority. But I said it's up to you all on that one. And then you did say, then with the stained, opaque, or just stained.
Yeah, just stained, so it's just no unfinished wood, not
So
that
no,
it-
certainly. The
Yeah.
thing is, you can have a clear stain, and so the idea, and I don't know why, I go back into the history of the guidelines back to 1995. There seemed to be this issue with unfinished wood, so I'm sort of respecting those past,
Yeah.
but it's.
And I was viewing it more as like, a clear stain to me would be fine, as it's helping prevent the wood from degrading or being, that kind of,
Yeah, like the benches.
like raw pine, stuff, but
If it's
something,
well-maintained, like the benches
Yeah.
at Rapture, which I know Mike is going to get taken care of, so yeah, I
yeah,
understand.
so, as long as it's just not unfinished and,
Have you had an example of someone putting in a planter that had bright colors? Someone proposed that? Or is there?
No one's proposed, I think that probably the brightest thing I've seen out there, the fire truck red cart, but no. And a little bit of taking a step back, I came on 8 years ago or 7 years ago, I have trouble with the clock math. We went into COVID and everything kind of got weird. Then we come out of COVID and we're sort of playing catch up on a lot of things. To say what has happened over the last couple of
Okay,
years.
that's fine.
Yeah.
So, I don't know that I have strong opinions about that. The BAR, I guess you're concerned if it's whatever constitutes bright, then that will detract from the sort of original vision of the.
Right, yeah, and that the historic district has that priority. But again, it doesn't say no, it just says, if I'm going to review it, I say no bright colors. You want bright colors, let's go talk to the BAR.
to me, the word avoid here means try not to, but it doesn't mean come talk to the BAR.
Well, it means, so when if someone, like for example, someone on Park Street the other day asked me if I could administratively approve moving where they park their car from the back of the house to the front. The house is situated such that the BAR would probably say, that's not a problem. But for me to review something administratively, I have to take the guidelines for what they say, and it says, do not park in front of the house. So by saying, avoid bright colors, that's where I would say, I have
So
to
if
tell you
someone
no.
comes
Right.
with bright colors, then they just need to go to the BAR.
Correct.
Well, so I think if that's what your intention is, then it would be unless approved by BAR, no bright colors, whereas avoid is like.
It is instruction, and right, in
Yeah,
the
I'm not,
BAR.
okay,
yeah.
like noted, they don't want bright colors, but I'm gonna do it
Correct.
anyway, it doesn't indicate that they need to
But
go to the
whole-
BAR for it.
The overall idea, though, would be that if this is sort of like the first pass, when Jeff sees it, I think all of this is such that it could be appealed to the BAR.
Right, the,
So is there a different word beside avoid
well,
that?
one thing there is appealing to the BAR comes with a charge, right?
The BAR would also apply the guidelines, but they have some judgment there.
No, I mean like a financial charge.
Yes, everything is.
Right, yeah.
Keeps people from doing what happened with the entrance corridor. a few
Yeah,
years ago.
so it's
We've done
not,
that.
it's not necessarily casual.
It's like
It's not a huge amount,
$50.
Yeah. And time.
What's the
But
cost?
so I don't know, I don't think we should avoid bright colors.
It's
but-
125 to,
125?
for a BAR review and a formal review. It's essentially asking the BAR for a formal review.
I have no strong opinions about the bright colors, but what I can't speak to is what this historic district requirements state. I mean, is that like a thing, or it seems?
Again, it's the.
I'm an engineer and a project manager, so when I start talking about like colors and stuff, I know it's important and real, but.
It's again saying that we've got a designed space. We've got planters that,
But I guess my point is,
those are the emphasis.
if there were bright colors, does the Department of Homeland historicity come in and?
We don't talk about that. It's a secret.
Like rappel in and say, okay, well then I'm fine with bright colors.
Yeah, I mean, a smoothie shop has a potted plant and the pot is painted like a strawberry. Like, to me, that doesn't hurt the appeal of them all.
Yeah, there's a balance.
And I don't
to
think
be
they
struck,
have to go to the BAR to get a strawberry potted plant.
But it does get to, and when someone calls me and says, I want to paint my house, I say, what color? If it's bright purple and fluorescent orange, I'm going to the BAR. So
I
have
understand
to-
what you're saying.
yeah. It just gives us do you have a better word or
I would, again, I would just defer to the BAR.
Yeah. So do you have a lot more? Because
I mean,
it seemed
we're-
like each one we getting deeper and deeper.
Yeah, I mean, that's, I appreciate wanting to go home, but we're also here for this.
And just in terms of process, just for myself, respectfully, we got these at 11:30 a.m. I haven't had time to review them. I know there's a desire probably to just get this over with. But for me, my personal decision-making, it just seems too ad hoc for me personally.
These are pretty much the exact same ones that I sent after the last meeting. They're just in Word format instead of chart format.
Sure, and I haven't even had time since 11:30 a.m. today to review it, which just didn't.
But we understand where your
that it's the
position
same
is.
content
Yes.
from last time. So, okay, let's put a pin in that. We'll keep going. We'll come back to that. The next one, the feed troughs, the conversation there was weight and movability. So what I did was take from the feedback that you all sent over, the highest weight for the ones that you did allow.
So the BAR didn't evaluate weight. They were looking at, the most important thing to them was the height and that screening. We know that those planters weigh a lot, and we know that city staff is concerned that if something's going on in the mall, they have to move them.
Mhm.
So I was trying to offer, and this is in that response to the questions, just to offer some context about these troughs are awfully heavy compared to other things. Granted, the result of the weight of a large pot is still great, and we can reduce that, but the BAR's point is size, visibility. My point is staff is reflecting what has been shared with me, and that is when Public Works has to go out there and move something that weighs 1,000 pounds or 450 pounds, that's from our public space, that is a problem. That's a concern.
Yes,
and we have
so-
a lot of those.
So I thought the weight limit might be a more useful way of looking at it than the receptacle in this instance. And so in the email that was sent, it had, the potted plant that's 36 by 30 is from 300 to 460
Right.
pounds. So I was like, okay, well, if that's within the moving range that you all have allowed.
No, I'm saying the BAR didn't look at the weight. I'm just offering that to you all as was one reason for the sizes. Now, I guess if I should have said to the BAR, a 30-inch by 36-inch pot still weighs 450 pounds. But to them, they would say it's not creating the visual issue.
Mhm.
But I'm just sharing with you all, and that, I don't have to go weigh everything. Certainly, we can calculate and guess at what things are, but
Yeah.
that's the reason for these. I'm dealing with over at the old Sky Bar, they want to build a deck down there, but it has to be movable because of where it's located. Just trying to figure out the weight and the wheels and all these things. So again, trying to make things not complicated for me when I work with an applicant. And we just feel like, you know, if somebody says, I can't operate my cafe space unless I have a 500-pound planter there, that's,
All right, so
That's sort of my question.
how can we
So-
move on from this?
So I was trying to use the 450-pound limit as the guideline, so then you couldn't fill up a trough all the way with dirt. But I can budge on that, because, yeah, how are we gonna go around and weigh stuff?
yeah, I'm sorry, I know you don't want to debate with me, I don't want it to seem like a debate, I just offering back what, you know, the perspective that I
I'm
take.
trying to find a resolution, because I don't want this to come back again. I think we're almost there.
Yeah, we're moving
but
through
we
it.
getting, yeah.
So
Okay,
then
what
the
else
next bit is, it said no wood barrels, and one of the conversations we had at our previous meeting was on the finish of it, so I just added the word unfinished. So if you have a wood barrel, it's gotta be finished the way any other wood does.
I would say BAR sort of made its position on that. I think they just tend to look, it goes to that well-kept, but the BAR didn't want them, and they have historically not wanted them, but
Yeah,
you all can choose otherwise.
Yeah, and I think that's hard to say in especially such a wine country town.
Was it the deputy city manager that's on this?
No.
Sorry.
Anybody else have a feeling strongly about wood barrels?
Strongly, no.
No unfinished wood barrels.
Yeah, as opposed to no wood barrels. I think if they're finished and, they're not gonna disintegrate, they're fine.
Yeah,
I'm okay with that.
Okay, great. Then moving down to design for, I just took away the no lighting and planters.
So I'll address, Remy, will you go to slide 13, just sort of cover lighting generally where, so we have, keep going, one more. Got right here. So, again, this gets to the, we've got lanterns at this one space that are on the railing. We've got the thing wrapped on the railing. Go to the next slide, Remy. So we've got here, I can show you sort of, not sure what that is on the bottom right. You just sort of see what we get when we say, yeah, go put decorative lighting up however you wish. And then one more, Remy, and I offered this to the BAR, and I think it was in some of what I shared with you all, and not trying to be overly sarcastic, but this is the type of thing that then comes back to me, and people say, can I do this? Can I do that? Why won't you let me do this? And I think that's where we've said, if you want decorative lighting on your tables, and it's removed when your cafe's not in operation, we're fine with it. But the concern is you get something like any of these up there, and then they just get stored out there because there's no, they go on the railing and they stay. They go hanging from the umbrellas and they stay. They get stuck in the planters and they stay. And when, those 12 hours, 15 hours a day where a space isn't open, that public space has been appropriated by kitschy lights fixtures. So that's the rationale.
Yes, and
behind it.
I can see that there's a difference between these and then the ones that you showed us that are actually there on the mall.
The ones on the railing, the solar, certainly.
Yeah.
But then provide, I'm now stuck deciding, and that's where I'm trying to, so that was where the BAR came down and said, we can allow decorative lights and things on tables, but to start sort of letting folks do what they want and putting it on me to decide
I know
whether that's okay or not.
the placement of the heating lamps during the pandemic ended up doing significant damage to the trees. Obviously, this wouldn't likely be that extreme, but do you just see, the possibility of being able to put up lamps and lightings that could potentially damage the trees in some way?
The tree clause prohibits
Yeah,
anything
we don't
from
want
touching
anything,
or being
Nothing,
near the
but
trees.
it just becomes that those things
This is
go
on the
up
railing.
and then they stay. They don't come down when the cafe's closed, and so how do I say no, or how do I say yes? What's the guidance I have? So it's just easier to say, you can do decorative things on your tables, take them in. We have catenary lights, we have plenty of lighting. And I'll reemphasize what, talking to some of the BAR members over the last couple weeks. This is a public space. These are leased cafe spaces. This mall is owned by the city of Charlottesville. And they are not owned by these restaurants.
Yeah, we're with you, we understand. So, how do you feel about that, Natalie? You still feel like that should go?
I mean, this slide feels a little scare tactic-y, whereas the pictures, the back
Well,
one
they're
or
trying to
back
come up- I
two.
mean, to be fair, they're trying to come up with something that they can apply
Absolutely,
reasonably.
absolutely.
And it's
So
hard.
we could go back to that slide that we were on with the pictures of what actually, the one before, because we're talking about, yeah, this sort of thing. Those to me are fine.
So how would we capture that in this where he can make a decision?
Well, before we come up with language, are those fine for everybody else?
Doesn't bother me one
Oh,
bit.
Yeah.
you keep pointing down there.
Oh, sorry.
I know what you were- Okay.
Yeah, same,
Right,
we're looking
right.
at the same thing. So, like, those, those to me are compatible. That little lantern matches everything else, and then the low profile neutral of the, I mean, that's practically silver tone. That to me reads as compatible. So, Jeff, do you have language you would prefer that would allow these things, or would you like me to come up with something?
I don't want to sound difficult, but I don't,
Yeah, no, that's
I'm
fine.
expressing
'Cause
the
you don't
BAR's
want
view.
them.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm, this is what the BAR wants, not what I want, but though I agree with them on this.
And in my opinion, I'm still fine with the BAR's language, and I'm guessing there's just a disagreement, but in my mind, a business paying $125 for an application is a very low barrier that is, I think, the best mechanism to resolve questions like this still, but.
Yeah, I
Okay,
think that's,
for the fact that this would come down to Jeff, we can move on from this one. No lighting and planters will stand.
I'm sorry.
No lighting and planters will stand. I would argue also that's the railing, not the planter, which is a
The
different
reason, yeah,
clause.
this is where it's also get difficult. A lot of the ABC rules only require an enclosure, and there are some spaces that are used planters to create that enclosure. So railings doesn't always fit, so we sort of, you'll see where I refer to enclosure at times. but-
Okay. Then in planters, the next section, it said live only, no artificial plants. I've changed that to live plants preferred. Just thinking about in the depths of winter when it's especially bleak, it might be nice to have a little,
I
thing
mean,
up.
I guess I would say it's winter and we don't have plants, but it used to be in winter, the cafe spaces went away. But I defer to you all on that. I think the BAR was very saying, they want
Yeah.
things that are real and not plastic. It was really a plastic thing as much as
yeah,
anything.
that's where I see that they can get pretty cheesy looking. So, I mean,
I'd prefer live plants.
yeah, me too.
All right, we'll take that out. For umbrellas, prefer solid colors. I went back and in the photos that I sent out a couple weeks ago, there were some old pictures from back when Woolworths was still there. This looked like early 80s-ish fashion, that had yellow and white striped umbrellas. I don't see, I mean, we already have no signage, no labels, no ads, that sort of thing, no printing on there, but,
Yeah, the BAR did struggle with this. If we had any verbal fistfights over anything, it was about the cloth of the umbrellas. I think that they just didn't want a cacophony of stuff. I will say it likely needs an edit where I say umbrellas, cloth, stance metal, poles wood, preferred solid colors or not isn't clear that it's the cloth of the umbrellas, but whatever you all came down on. But it does, again, kind of leave it to, if someone comes in and says, I want, a checkerboard, pink and white, Jeff, let me do it. It doesn't give me much guidance. And so if something could be reasonable, that allows me to say no or yes or maybe, but it then puts it on me, and then people in the neighborhood do call me. That's why
What's wrong with the language prefer solid colors?
well, does variation requires BAR approval mean that if it's solid, prefer versus require? And then, so let's say you do want a yellow and white striped umbrella. Okay, well, it's not the preference, but oh well. Are you required, does that a variation that requires BAR approval or not? Just because it's a preference, not a requirement. So it's unclear.
So the preference is, again, for me, my guidance is, love it, you've got solid colors. If you want something else, it goes to the BAR. Now,
If we said umbrellas, cloth, stands, metal, poles, wood or metal, variation requires bar approval, stands and hoist must be black, cloth preference is solid, then it's just expressing a preference, it's not requiring an action.
Okay. I mean, is my interpretation incorrect with the current language that, let's say someone came to you with a two-colored umbrella, that under the language preferred, you could say yes or no to it. If you said no to it, then they could discuss it with the BAR. But you wouldn't be required to say no to it. But you would, in your evaluation of yes or no, you've expressed that you prefer a solid color.
Right.
Is that a correct interpretation?
yes, and so it's trying to be two things at once. One, to give me some reasonable flexibility, but to still kind of make it clear how far I can go. And then it becomes guidance to the BAR.
Right. So if, say, 5 guys returned to the downtown mall and they wanted umbrellas with their corporate branding color, you would have some basis to say no.
Yes, yes.
But they're not allowed to have Five Guys printed on it.
Correct, but there's brands that have uniform brand colors without lettering, like red and white checkers.
Yeah, I mean, and it's a good question, because we don't have those type of businesses on the mall, and they're probably coming, and we probably welcome them. So, again, some flexibility there. There's not a no in here, but it's not saying you can't have umbrellas. I'm not sure how to advise, other than I think it allows someone, if they want to do something different, we can discuss it, but it allows me to make some reasonable judgment if they ask me about something.
So, Lloyd, where are you, do you, for this particular, do you want it to be, to go to the BAR for,
We can let that one go. Yeah, we can say keep it as is, that's fine. Now down to wood elements generally. Materials and colors, again, just changed it from opaque stain to just stained wood. And then removed the no wood barrels. So no unfinished wood is the overarching theme for anything wood. That matches what we decided earlier.
That'd be direction. We take that as direction. If that's what you agree.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry, could you just repeat it again?
Yes, so this just matches what we agreed earlier, painted or stained wood and no unfinished wood, and then removed the additional no wood barrels because we allowed it earlier as long as they're finished.
And Jeff, you don't see there being a question there, right? You understand what that means, so you would be able to say yes or no to that.
I mean, I understand what it's saying is if someone has a wood barrel, they can have it as long as it's
Finished.
painted or stained. Now, if it becomes a planter, that's different, but, yeah, I understand that.
Just want to make sure.
Thank you. Then for the heaters, I just went and Googled
You did
the
what I did,
standard
so
U-line
that's fine.
heater, and it was a little bit bigger than what the inches in the BAR proposal were. So I just adjusted that to allow room for those to fit.
And that's fine. Back for the October 1st meeting, I looked up every heater known and made a list and then sort of said, all right, most of these, I don't know, maybe I hit 8 instead of 9. 90 inches is fine.
Yeah.
The thing to understand about these is that the fire department regulates these. They are one of the big problems with the trees, have been the heaters. So I think there's a lot of thought in the city that if we didn't have to deal with them, that would be fine. But we have to follow what the fire department says. Heaters have to be approved by a zoning official. So in some ways, it's out of my hands. What the BIR was most concerned about, and Remy, will you flick backwards, go up, 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 up. So we were right there. So yeah, that's from the tree management plan, some of the problems. Go down one. Where the BAR was saying, all right, what if we start getting these other things? What if somebody comes out and does an enclosed fire pit? And so I think that's the key thing here. Follow the fire department's rules. Don't kill the trees. Don't catch your umbrellas on fire. And let's not have monstrosities that start to come out and take over them all.
Yeah.
So
And that's
I'm
all
fine with
good. I
this.
absolutely don't
Yeah.
want any more damage to the mall. I just wanted to make sure the ones we did allow actually fit.
Yeah, fine with that.
Okay, thank you. So I'm gonna remove that note. And then the no hanging planters, to me, the examples that we got were all hanging on railings, so they were outside of the
Right,
edge. But
that's-
if they're hanging inside within the edge, I feel like that's fine, so then nothing outside of the edge already is the regulation, so we don't need a
Correct.
specific no
Correct.
hanging planter regulation.
And so that was, yeah, that was some of the goal of that. If you, go down, Remy.
And so I don't even mind like a clarifying thing, instead of no hanging planters, it said hanging planters must be fully enclosed by
Correct.
the thing.
Correct.
If that's better, then we can
And in
have it
fact,
say that.
and go to the next slide, Remy, because that's where we have, these you would say are hanging on the railings, and the one on the left is fine if it got flipped inside. So I would have no problem at the point of, no hanging planters that extend outside the enclosure. That's fine.
Okay, cool. So we'll have language that specifies that instead of none, because, if they're
Yeah,
inside, that's.
we have some ADA things we're going to have to let Mr. Rudisil address, but that's the reason for that.
Okay, cool, thanks. Then trees in bosques, that was just a spelling thing.
That's fine.
Lighting generally, I removed the on railings or cafe enclosures or under the counters, just because that's,
The same sort of discussion of the lighting in these
we could say
cafes
white
competing
light.
with, right?
So
yeah.
we don't get the, cacophony of color that we're afraid of, and.
I think that's up to you all, yeah. But that was sort of the idea, that we don't have competing light shows out there.
Yeah,
Which
so
we
I
sort
think
of
if
have
it's
right
all,
now.
white light, except for the holiday permit that people get, it's
Mm-hmm.
okay to have some underlighting.
I mean, I understand your question. The BAR would say no, but I understand your question, yes.
And so no uplighting, that makes sense, because that's a light pollution thing, so that would have to permit required.
The under counter is not prevalent, but there's a couple places, that's up to you, and then on the railings and the enclosures, which we discussed prior.
Okay. Poles will be straight, I don't think they need to be round, I don't know, they could be square, whatever.
This seemed to be what everything that was a
Yeah.
light pole was, but
Yeah.
fine.
And then that was it. Oh, except the very, very last
Yes,
sentence.
yeah.
Just a
You
semicolon
solved it
instead
one
of
way, I
colon.
solved it, I just deleted outdoor. But it works with a colon or however.
Because it was outdoor, comma, and then upholstered oversized furniture, and so I didn't know if that meant outdoor furniture.
Yeah, so you-
Upholstered
it
and
just-
oversized.
You can take outdoor out of there.
Okay.
Obviously, it's outdoor, but it's
Yeah.
that idea of the big fancy couches that you see around.
Sure, or like, frat house front porch style couch out there. I totally get not wanting that. Or
Working
just
with architects is like
anything in the
working with
elements.
engineers. I don't really count on the grammar and spelling to be right.
So then the only thing left remaining is going back up to the planters and whether or not we want to avoid bright colors.
Again, I would defer to the BAR on it, and I know there's just a disagreement, but I think the ability for a business, if they still feel strongly about it, to pay $125 and go through an application, I think is an adequate way to resolve conflict.
Anyone else?
I think I'm going to side with Michael on that.
All right. Great. So that's all of it.
So how do we capture this?
So the only things that might need an official kind of language situation is hanging planters must be fully inside of the enclosed space and white lighting only.
Under counter.
Yeah, for any of the, on railings, cafe enclosures, anything like that.
So this is the force of a resolution or just like the approval of guidelines?
We've been told everything need to be in the form of a resolution.
So
I
can
don't-
we, Madam Clerk, just sort of say the notes that were taken?
Move approval of the resolution with amendments, or as amended.
Are we good? We ready to do that?
And then you would provide a clean copy? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, NDS is working on that, I believe.
Okay.
I would move for approval of the resolution, the guidelines as amended in the discussion tonight and to be captured in a clean document, or that has been, or is being captured in a clean document.
Second.
Okay.
Can we vote?
And thank you, everybody, for your patience and collaboration.
Motion passes
All
5-0.
questions,
Thank
yeah.
you, Natalie, for, putting extra work on that. We appreciate it. The next.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff.
Well, I was gonna thank you all, Natalie, thank you. Yeah, all questions are good questions, so thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
All right.
The next item is the second time opportunity for community matters. Would anyone like to speak?
I'll make this brief. Mr. Mayor, councilors, Ms. Thomas, Mr. Sanders, staff that are here, representing the people that are here 24/7. Thank you for your service, all of you. My name is Matt Daring. I am board co-chair for Cultivate Charlottesville. I've lived in Charlottesville for 20 years. I'm also the Walker Buford PTO treasurer, and I was the garden coordinator at Burn the Moran and put in the garden there, and also the sound barrier along the 250 bypass, because we found that having a garden right next to the 250 bypass wasn't real great. So when I say that I've invested my blood, sweat, and tears into Charlottesville, I mean it quite literally. I appreciate the master plan that was shown earlier on the Parks and Rec, and I wanted to show my support for it and Cultivate Charlottesville support for it. I especially appreciated the super block that you mentioned, from going from Kindlewood and coming around to the proposed garden at Booker T. Washington Park, and it kind of creates this arc of service if you think about West Street and the entire community that Cultivate Charlottesville really serves in our UAC program, providing fresh fruits and vegetables. The need for that garden is especially important right now for both of those gardens because of the space that we lost where Kindlewood is sitting, where the gardens used to be for Friendship Court, if people remember that space there. And the need for food has only increased in Charlottesville. We talked a lot about shelter, and food is one of the things that's right behind that, that impacts people's ability to live meaningful lives and successful lives. So it's important to have that place there. Beyond the garden specifically, I'd like to speak in support of the entire master plan, and especially the need for bike paths and connectivity to connect these neighborhoods that Ms. Smith was talking about, the separation. These connected pathways can actually overcome some of that separation and segregation that's happened and connect neighborhoods together. My son every day walks through a pathway that connects Johnson Village to Buford on his way to school. So I've seen it firsthand. I'd also like to point out another thing. You pointed out that it's 75 million over 10 years, so that's 7.5 million. I have biked from the Rockstar route from Rocktown to Harrisonburg to Star City Roanoke, and also from DC to Pittsburgh, and have spent thousands of dollars at towns and cities along the way of those pathways, and also in Richmond, a lot of time in those places. So I think it's very important to invest in those places. People don't come here for our parking lots and what have you. They come here for our parks, our downtown malls that we just spent a lot of time talking about the importance of that. So I think it's important to make those investments into those spaces, not just for food, but also connectivity and exercise. And it's an important thing to remember that you don't get the dividends if you don't buy the stock. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Matt. Anyone else like to speak?
I am Kidder Bishop, And I own a property on 7.5 Street that is in the first block between the defunct Elm Street and Cherry Avenue. And so I thought while we were talking about homeless shelters, we could also talk about the stormwater management issues behind the 4 houses between Cherry Avenue and the defunct Elm Street. I had heard years ago that one of the barriers to entry to doing a city had kind of a sketch for dealing with the stormwater management back there. But that the Salvation Army's lawyers and then city turnover and city staff had been a barrier to like moving forward with looking at that project. And so just as while we're talking about Cherry Avenue and Salvation Army's owned land, that it might make sense to also think about that stretch. It used to flood our yards until we kind of all as neighbors started helping things be a little better managed. So, but it's a fair bit of work to do that. So that's all I had to say, a little selfish push for a city project that apparently there's money for it from the stormwater management fees. So, thank you.
Is there a specific city staff member it would be best to, if you have information to email about it, to email?
No, I think that Mr. Freeze can follow up on that item because that would be associated with the Utilities Department.
Sir, did you?
Hi, I'm Dave Stackhouse. I live over near McIntyre Park in the city. I am also on the board of directors at the Charlottesville Area Mountain Bike Club. I'm not speaking for them tonight. And I was on BPAC for 4 years. So I just want council to be aware of a couple things that are, I saw y'all kind of almost barf when you saw the $75 million item on the master plan for Parks and Rec. The first thing I would say is that a substantial 40% of that was paved connectivity. A lot of that paved connectivity was in the 2015 Bike Ped Master Plan that our city paid for, that is on a backlog that hasn't been funded and hasn't been completed. So I urge council, when they look at this, to kind of separate the paved connectivity part of this, which really should be part of BPAC and bike pedestrian coordination, and is not part of recreation. I'm not saying they don't overlap. I'm 100% in favor of all this connectivity. Just separate the budget item, and when it's 40% of 75 million, it's a big dollar item. So that influences the way we look at this master plan. The other thing I would say is the connectivity needs to include the county. There's no connection that I saw on that map to Hayward, to Biscuit Run, to places that we recreate. No connection to the Mill Creek Trail. No connection to the river north. No connection to the county. So just like I saw you tonight, join a regional transportation association. I think the council needs to try to create a regional recreational association with the county. That would really be productive. Lastly, the plan appeared to pave over substantial portions of the Ravenna Trail. The Ravenna Trail is a gem. It's unique to almost any city in America. A 20-mile rustic off-road trail. All our high schools have mountain bike teams. 650 kids show up to compete. They use the Ravenna Trail to train. They use the Ravenna Trail to get to O Hill, to get to Hayward, to get to Biscuit Run, to get to all the places where they need to ride. And when people who were interviewed asked for trails, they weren't asking for paved trails. They were just asking for trails. So I urge council to kind of consider those things. There's a whole lot more detail. I also want to compliment you on your work and your dedication, because this has been an experience to watch you work tonight. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming out.
There's a euphemism.
Yeah. Anyone else would like to speak? Okay, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
Okay, we have to vote. Thank you, have a nice evening.